Chapter 1905. Li Po felt uneasy. He looked at Yu Qingyang and then at Lin Sun. He seemed to understand and cried out involuntarily, "You, bang!" With a wave of Yu Qingyang's sleeve, Li Po's body exploded and was erased on the spot. It was as easy as pinching an ant. Seeing this scene and thinking of the fight with Chui Fu just now, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. The difference between a quasi-emperor and an emperor was really different. "My young friend, I was already here before Chui Fu took action." Yu Qingyang glanced at Lin Sun with a touch of admiration, "But I didn't expect that you didn't even give me a chance to help." Lin Sun couldn't help smiling bitterly. If he had known that Yu Qingyang was here, he wouldn't have fought so hard to deal with Chui Fu. However, Lin Sun also knew that Yu Qingyang's action was equivalent to providing him with an excellent opportunity to practice. After all, the precious experience of fighting with a quasi-emperor was enough for Lin Sun to benefit greatly in the future. "Let's get out of here first," Yu Qingyang said. Soon, Yu Qingyang took Lin Sun to the divine palace of Emperor Yu, picked up Yu Yunhe and the other two, and left the Diyu secret realm together. On this day there was a strange silence in the Diyu world, and no news came out. "Haha, you've fallen into a trap of your own making. The Star Jade Sword Pavilion's method of sealing off the news is truly extraordinary." Lin Sun had already returned to the Yu clan with Yu Qingyang. When he learned about the situation, Yu Qingyang couldn't help laughing. Lin Sun killed the big shots of the Nine Realms and the quasi-emperor Chui Fu, but no news came out. It could only prove that even the Star Sword Pavilion, which had blocked the news earlier, was still in the dark. That's good. No one knows the truth. Even if it is spread out in the future, no one will believe that those holy kings of the Nine Realms were killed by Lin Sun, Yu Qingyang said thoughtfully. Including this time, he took Lin Sun back to the clan without alarming anyone, in order not to leak the news of Lin Sun. "Old ancestor." Nanqiu came over with a cup of tea and said with a smile, "It turns out that you've already made arrangements." Yu Qingyang was speechless and said, "You little girl." Just as Yu Qingyang had expected, the bloody incident that happened in the Diyu mystic realm only came out 3 days later. All of a sudden, the great Yu world was shaken. It wasn't just Qi Lingzi, Shuebiun, and the others that had been annihilated in this battle, even all the saint kings from the 9 worlds had perished. This was undoubtedly too terrifying. Especially when they learned that a quasi-emperor realm supreme elder of the Jade Star Sword Pavilion had fallen, the entire world was shaken. Who did it? How dare they? The Star Jade Sword Pavilion was infuriated. They went all out to investigate this matter, but in the end they couldn't find any clues. That was because before the bloody battle erupted, all information had been sealed by them. Even they did not know the exact situation of the battle. Could it be the work of that young man called Lin Daoyuan? Someone guessed. But very quickly he was met with countless rebuke. This is practically the biggest joke in the world. How can a young junior be a match for a group of saint kings? Don't forget, another quasi-emperor is also dead. No matter how heaven-defying Lin Daoyuan is, can he be a match for a quasi-emperor? In short, in this sensational event, no one doubted that it was Lin Sun who did it. This result was exactly what Yu Qingyang wanted to see. Similarly, in this storm, no one suspected the Yu clan. The reason was very simple. From the beginning, they had announced to the world that the Yu clan, an imperial family, had nothing to do with Lin Daoyuan. Moreover, in the secret realm of Diyu, there was no expert of the Yu clan, an imperial family, at all. No one could suspect all this on the Yu clan. When the matter is done, the merit and fame are deeply hidden. Yu Qingyang sighed softly. Half a month later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. His injuries had healed, and his physical strength had also returned to its peak state. He was full of energy and his qi was smooth. During this period of time, while healing and recovering, he refined the power of great ways that he had devoured and seized. Not only did his cultivation become more and more stable, but his understanding of the realm of Tao had also improved. Especially when he refined the energy of the great ways of Feng Wuxue, the scarlet-robed man, and the luxuriously robed woman, it allowed Lin Sun to comprehend the essence and secrets of their domains of principles. It greatly benefited Lin Sun and gave him deep inspiration. By analogy, he could draw inferences about other things. There was also some power of great ways that belonged to the Saint King realm that was sealed by Lin Sun and refined into the Great Way Source Jade. He planned to give it to others or sell it in the future, because these power of great ways were no longer of any use to him. It's difficult for my cultivation to make a breakthrough in a short period of time. Next, I should think about how to improve my combat power, Lin Sun pondered. There were only 3 ways to improve one's combat power at the early stage of the Saint King realm. First, it was to improve the power of the treasure, such as improving the quality of the broken blade. Second, it was to further condense and perfect the realm of Tao. This was related to the use of Lin Sun's cultivation. If the realm of Tao was completely formed, the power that it could exert would definitely undergo a qualitative transformation. However, Lin Sun knew that perfecting the realm of Tao could not be rushed, and there was no room for mistakes. If he wanted to achieve the ultimate Tao, he naturally had to put in the utmost effort. For example, his current realm of Tao was only in its embryonic form, but it was already able to suppress Saint Kings like Feng Wuxue, deprive and devour their power of great ways. Such power could be said to be heaven-defying. Third, it was the cultivation of Tao. When one reached the peak of the Saint King realm, his fighting style and means were also different from before. For example, the Great Way Furnace scripture needed to be further perfected so that this Tao could be integrated with the power of the realm of Tao. Other legacies, such as the Taishan sword scripture, the Great Endless Devouring scripture, the Great Scripture of Silence, and the No Return also needed to be tempered again. Thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat. He immediately decided to focus on the cultivation of the Great Way Golden Quartz scripture. As long as he cultivated the 5 internal organs, it was equivalent to having the 5 virtue Tao body, which could be divided into 5 doppelgangers of great ways. Each doppelganger had unfathomable power, and its combat power was not weaker than the original body. Think about it, including the original body, a total of 6 of himself would attack together. How amazing would that scene be? Even if he went to fight with a character like Quasi-Emperor Cui Fu, it would increase his chances of winning. But before that, Lin Sun had already decided to leave the Diu realm. Now that the Diu realm was in turmoil, it was no longer suitable for him to stay. Even Li Po could speculate his identity through some details. If someone else noticed these things, it was bound to cause a lot of trouble. Senior. Lin Sun walked out of the cultivation place and saw Yu Qingyang. Are you going to leave? Yu Qingyang seemed to have already guessed Lin Sun's thoughts. Lin Sun nodded. He was going to the primordial world in the Central Star area. Only by reaching there could he find the answers to many questions. For example, the way to the true dragon world, paying a visit to Jiang Xingchue of the Jiang family, and going to the Shinji Taoist sect to inquire about the ancient wasteland fighting alliance. Young friend, let's not talk about the twists and turns you'll encounter on the way from the Purple Hing starfield to the Central Starfield. Let's talk about the primordial world, the 6 great Tao courts, the 10 great battle clans, and the various colossi are all hunting you down. Yu Qingyang reminded, no matter how careful you are, there is no shortage of powerful people in the world. Sooner or later, they will see through your identity. At that time, I'm afraid you will be the enemy of the whole world. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes slightly and said, I understand all these, but I still have to go. It's just that I'll try to keep a low profile in the future and change a new identity. After a pause, he continued, if there is a day when my identity is exposed and I have no way to retreat, I'll go to the dark world. Didn't you say that the dark world is the only way to survive when there is no way to retreat? At the end of his words, he couldn't help laughing. The dark world? It was better not to go to that damn place if possible. Seeing this, Yu Qingyang said no more. With Lin Sun's current state of mind and wisdom, he must be very clear about how big the storm in the primordial world would be. I've inquired about it for you. It won't be long before a ship passes by the Great Yu world and then crosses the starry sky to the central star area. Yu Qingyang said, "This ship is owned by the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, the first force in the Ziheng star area. I had a close relationship with an old ancestor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. At that time, I will arrange for the Yu clan to help you to follow the descendant of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. In this way, even if you encounter some troubles on the way, there will be someone to take care of you." Speaking of this, Yu Qingyang thought for a while and joked, "At that time, you can disguise yourself and become a guard of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion." Lin Sun also smiled, and a warm feeling surged in his heart. It turned out that Yu Qingyang had already arranged for him to leave. "My young friend, you must take care of yourself on this trip to the primordial world." Like a kind elder, Yu Qingyang exhorted Lin Sun. On this day, the old and the young talked for a long time while drinking. A few days later, in the distant sky of Jihua Divine Mountain, a shadow suddenly fell and covered the sky. Looking carefully, it was a huge boundary ship. It was simply like a floating world, and there were even rows of buildings and streets that extended in all directions. They were arranged neatly together, and it was truly a magnificent sight. This was the boundary ship of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, the first orthodoxy in the Ziheng star area. It was called Wavering Ship, which meant to rise straight up. "My young friend, let's go. I have already told everything to the Heavenly Sound Pavilion." This time, it was Yu Bikong, the patriarch of the Yu clan, who sent Lin Sun away. Now, when facing Lin Sun, the patriarch of the Yu clan, there was a touch of respect in his expression. He already knew that Lin Sun was a person who could surpass his realm and kill a quasi-emperor. In his heart, he did not dare to treat Lin Sun as a junior. Lin Sun looked back at Jihua Divine Mountain. Go. At the peak of Jihua Divine Mountain, Yu Qingyang smiled and waved his hand. Chapter 1906. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and said, "Senior, let's go." Yu Bikong nodded. On the way, he handed a jade slip to Lin Sun. "My young friend, this is the new identity I've arranged for you." Lin Sun took it and had a look. It read, "Yu Xian, the 16th generation descendant of the Yu clan, has been cultivating for 819 years, and is at the early stage of the Sage King realm. He practices the 9 cauldrons world-suppressing scripture, has a calm temperament and outstanding combat capability." There was also a figure of Yu Xian in the jade slip. He was dressed in cyan, with loose black hair, broad eyebrows, and sharp facial features. He stood there casually like a heavy boulder. "Young friend, Yu Xian is a branch family member of the Yu clan, and according to seniority, he's my younger brother. A few years ago, he went into secluded cultivation, and he definitely won't come out within 100 years. No one will suspect you if you act with Yu Xian's identity." Yu Bikong transmitted his voice to Lin Sun. Lin Sun sighed inwardly. He knew that this must be Yu Qingyang's arrangement. Quietly, Lin Sun exerted the formless skill, and his appearance and figure changed accordingly to that of Yu Xian. Yu Bikong was stunned and amazed. Even with his eyesight, he couldn't see through Lin Sun's disguise. In a trance, he almost thought that Lin Sun was his real younger brother Yu Xian. "My young friend, this is the inheritance of the 9 cauldrons world-suppressing scripture. Ancestor Qingyang asked me to give it to you personally. He said that you should try not to expose your own inheritance in future battles." As Yu Bikong spoke, she solemnly handed a fist-sized, translucent bronze cauldron to Lin. Lin Sun was moved. The 9 cauldrons world-suppressing scripture. This was the Taoist scripture handed down by the ancestors of the Yu clan, a real treasured scripture of Emperor Tao. Such an inheritance was a secret that couldn't be measured by anything. But now, just to help him better hide his identity, Yu Qingyang imparted such an imperial scripture to him. How could Lin Sun not be surprised? With the 9 cauldrons world-suppressing scripture and the identity of Yu Xian, few people in this world could recognize him if he kept a low profile. After all, everyone knew that the inheritance of the 9 cauldrons world-suppressing scripture would never be leaked. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun said seriously, "Thanks Senior Qingyang for me. I will never forget your great kindness." Yu Bikong said with a smile, "Little friend, you can't address yourself as I, Lin, from now onward." The sky in the distance rumbled. The huge, rocking ship, that looked like a floating continent slowly floated in midair, flowing with Tao light. "Young friend, the identity I've arranged for you this time is a guard hired by the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. He represents the Yu clan, and his status is not low. You can do whatever you want." Yu Bikong reminded him telepathically. As he spoke, a peerlessly beautiful woman in a violet dress appeared out of thin air on the boat. Her skin was as white as mutton fat, her eyes were almond-shaped, her nose was jade-like, and her figure was slender and graceful. She was dignified and quiet, and her charm was outstanding. "Brother Jade Sky, we meet again." The beautiful woman in purple greeted him with a smile. It was obvious that she was very familiar with Yu Bikong. Yu Bikong laughed and greeted them. Then he pointed at Lin Sun and said, "This is my younger brother, Yu Xian. Nice to meet you, Taoism peer." After the introduction, Lin Sun already knew that this beautiful woman in purple was an elder of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion named Zhuang Yunji, a genuine peerless saint king. Zhuang Yunji nodded slightly and said with a smile on her pretty face, "We're not strangers. You don't have to be so polite." Without much delay, Zhuang Yunji boarded the boat with Lin Sun and waved goodbye to Yu Bikong. With a roar, the huge rocking ship that looked like a floating continent broke through the air. One day later, in the vast starry sky, the boat moved along a fixed course. Lin Sun was sitting under an ancient tree, pondering and comprehending the 9 cauldrons world suppression scripture. Sitting under an ancient tree, Lin Sun was pondering and comprehending the 9 cauldrons world suppression scripture. After boarding the boat, he was taken by Zhuang Yunji to live in this courtyard and told Lin Sun some information about the boat. The boat seemed to be just a boundary ship, but in fact it was no different from a city. There were streets extending in all directions, row upon row of buildings, and shops selling all kinds of rare treasures, elixirs, and treasures. In addition, there were also places such as Cultivation Taoist Court, Arena, Auction House, and so on, all of which were under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. The boat didn't prohibit outsiders from boarding, but those who wanted to take the boat had to pay an extremely expensive fee. 100,000 crystals. If one wanted to rent some houses with dense spiritual energy, the fee would only be higher. According to Zhuang Yunji, almost all the guests who boarded the boat came from the top forces in various worlds in the Ziheng Star area. They were all rich and noble. Only this kind of customer would be able to afford such an expensive fee. On the first day Lin Sun boarded the boat, he passed some streets that were bustling and lively. According to a rough estimate, there were at least 10,000 cultivators on the support boat. Based on this calculation, just the cost of traveling by ship alone was an astronomical figure that was enough to make one's jaw drop. This time, the boat of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion would set off from the Ziheng Star area to the primordial world in the Central Star area. On the way, it would cross many star areas and worlds. The journey was extremely long, and on the way, the boat would stop at some ferries, either to purchase supplies or to sell some goods to other worlds. It should be noted that on the starry ancient path, each world had its own special cultivation product. If these special products were sold, they could get 10 times or even 100 times the profit. According to Zhuang Yunji's calculation, even if everything went smoothly along the way, It would take at least half a year to reach the central star area. Half a year. Based on the time and speed of the boat's journey, one could imagine just how vast and boundless the starry ancient path was. Lin soon planned to master the mysteries of the 9 cauldrons world-suppressing scripture as soon as possible in this half a year. The first was to temper the spirit of the 5 viscera. As for whether there would be any disturbances along the way, Lin Sun was not very worried. The Ziheng star area was one of the 9 major star areas on the starry ancient path. There were many macro-worlds in it, and the Heavenly Sound Pavilion was ranked as the top force in the Ziheng star area. In contrast, the power of the Yu family, an imperial family, was far inferior to the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. For example, on this boat, there were dozens of king saints from the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. Among them, there were 7 top king saints, including Zhuang Yunji, and 2 quasi-emperor realm strongmen. With such a lineup, even if they encountered some storms along the way, they would be able to easily resolve them. "Senior, please enjoy your meal." 2 maids came from a distance, carrying baskets containing meals. They were dressed in light blue gauze skirts, looking delicate and charming, beautiful and gentle. One was called Chiu Kue and the other was Dong Yi. Lin Sun nodded. Chiu Kue and Dong Yi quickly served the meals one by one and placed them on the stone table. The dishes were all cooked with rare and precious magic materials. There were meat and vegetables, delicacies of fruits, and aged wine. They could be regarded as first-class delicacies in the cultivation world. This meal alone would cost thousands of Taoist gems. Cultivators below the Sage realm would not have the money to enjoy it at all. But for Lin Sun, both the quiet courtyard where he stayed and the meals he enjoyed every day were all free. When Lin Sun was eating, Chiu Kue and Dong Yi rolled up their sleeves, revealing their snow-white wrists. Their fingers were as slender as green jade. They poured wine and tea for him and dissected fruit. They were respectful, gentle, beautiful, and charming. Over the years, Lin Sun had been either cultivating in seclusion or adventuring in the world. He hadn't enjoyed such treatment for a long time. This rare relaxation and rest made him feel a little emotional. In the future, when he arrived in the Hong Meng world, he would probably not be able to enjoy such happiness. While serving Lin Sun, Chiu Kue and Dong Yi also secretly looked at Lin Sun. This courtyard was not open to the public. Generally, only guests regarded as extremely distinguished by the Heavenly Sound Pavilion could stay here. Before, Chiu Kue and Dong Yi had been specially told to take good care of this guest's daily life. If he had any requirements, they would be satisfied as long as they could provide it on the rocking boat. So when facing Lin Sun, the 2 women couldn't help feeling anxious and submissive, lest they did something wrong and neglected Lin Sun. Even if Lin Sun made some excessive requests, such as asking them to serve him in bed together or doing some very eccentric and abnormal things, they could only bite the bullet and agree, not daring to disobey. It should be known that the strong in the cultivation world were not people with a pure heart and few desires. There were all kinds of people with different personalities. The 2 girls had once heard that some of the distinguished guests who boarded the ship in the past had used their maids to cultivate the Een harvesting technique. There were also some who were crazily lecherous and liked to play some perverted tricks, often torturing the maids unspeakably. Fortunately, what made them feel slightly at ease was that this senior from the imperial clan, Yu clan, seemed to be quite normal and was easy to get along with. Ever since he boarded the ship, he had remained silent by himself, and even when he was dealing with female attendants like them, his attitude seemed to be very amiable. After Lin Sun had his meal, Chiu Kue and Dong Yi cleaned up and left together. Before long, Zhuang Yunji came to visit with a woman in white. Lin Sun stood up to greet her. After all, he was a guard this time. No matter how extraordinary his identity was, he had to do something related to guarding. Obviously, the woman in white brought by Zhuang Yunji this time was the one he was to guard. But when he saw her at first sight, Lin Sun was stunned. His heart rippled like a stone falling into the lake, and some memories of a long time ago came to his mind. How could it be her? The woman in white had picturesque eyebrows, smooth skin and jade-like bones. Her black hair was tied up in a bun at will. She was elegant and graceful. She was like a swaying green lotus, beautiful and clear. Although she was not breathtaking, she had the ethereal and gentle charm of a beautiful jade. Her white clothes were like white silk with a unique style. In Lin Sun's mind, a clear and beautiful figure of a woman dressed as a man emerged. Her voice was as clear as the flowing stream, like the sound of nature. When they first met, she blinked and asked with a smile, "Child, is there a second Lu Qingyan in the world?" Chapter 1907. Lu Qingyan. When Lin Sun was just a 14-year-old boy who had just entered the Xiao Empire, Lu Qingyan was already the most famous cultivator in the world. Her features were picturesque, ethereal and clear, and her music was superb. When Lin Sun rose in the forbidden city of the empire, and was received by the empress, Lu Qingyan played a song to celebrate Lin Sun. But later, Lu Qingyan left the Xiao Empire and there was no news of her. It was said that she had gone to the ancient desolation for cultivation. In the following years, whether Lin Sun cultivated in the ancient desolation or returned to the Xiao Empire, he never heard of Lu Qingyan again. Lin Sun didn't expect to see her again on the Heavenly Sound Pavilion's boat on the starry ancient road. For a moment, Lin Sun couldn't help being stunned. At the same time, Lu Qingyan, who was dressed in white and had her black hair tied up in a bun, frowned slightly. The eyes of the man in front of her were too bold. "Taoism peer, she is my disciple, Lu Qingyan. During the period before we arrive at the Hongmeng world, I'll have to trouble you to protect her," Zhuang Yunji said with a smile. She noticed Lin Sun's strange look, but she also understood that anyone who saw her beautiful disciple would inevitably be in a trance. In the entire Ziheng Star Zone, who didn't know the name of Lu Qingyan of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion? Okay. Lin Sun calmed down and nodded in agreement. He had calmed down. Even if his old friend was close at hand, at this moment, he couldn't recognize her because he was Yu Xian of the Yu family. "Junior Lu Qingyan, nice to meet you, Senior." Lu Qingyan saluted. Her voice was as sweet and clear as the sound of nature. She was as beautiful as a painting. "You're welcome." Lin Sun had a strange feeling in his heart. If she knew his real identity, how would she react? "Yen go to the neighboring yard to have a rest," Zhuang Yunji urged. Lu Qingyan nodded and turned away. Until her figure disappeared, Zhuang Yunji sighed softly and said, "Taoism peer, are you wondering why the inherited disciple of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion asked you to protect her?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "I don't know. Please tell me." Zhuang Yunji took a deep breath and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're not an outsider. Since things have come to this, I can't hide it from you." Soon, Zhuang Yunji told him the reason. As the #1 orthodoxy in the Purple Heng Galaxy, the Heavenly Music Pavilion had many talented true disciples. Each of them was like a dragon or phoenix among men, with extraordinary talent. Lu Qingyan was one of them. She had entered the Heavenly Music Pavilion to cultivate 5 years ago. In just 3 years, she had shone brilliantly among her peers and stood out from the rest. She was chosen by Zhuang Yunji, who was an elder of the pavilion, and taken in as a true disciple. Especially in the past 2 years, Lu Qingyan had made rapid progress in music and became the most dazzling one among the inherited disciples. However, it was precisely because her performance was too dazzling that she suffered a lot of competition and exclusion from her fellow disciples. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. This was very normal. If that was all, with Zhuang Yunji's power in the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, it was enough to protect Lu Qingyan from too much trouble. However, there was a change not long ago. A descendant of the primitive Taoism court named Kongyu, when he was a guest in the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, took a fancy to Lu Qingyan and directly pursued her, hoping to win her heart. Lu Qinyan didn't accept and refused Kong Yu's pursuit, but he didn't give up and still pestered Lu Qinyan. Lu Qinyan, who was annoyed, planned to go out to avoid the limelight. Unexpectedly, she met Kong Yu on the way out. Moreover, after being rejected by Lu Qinyan again, Kong Yu was so angry that he directly took action and wanted to take Lu Qinyan away. If Lu Qinyan hadn't seen the opportunity quickly and escaped with a secret method, she would have been almost succeeded by Kong Yu. Such a change alarmed the whole Heavenly Sound Pavilion. Lu Qinyan thought that the pavilion would stand up for her and punish Kong Yu severely. But the final result was that Lu Qinyan bowed her head and endured, and apologized to Kong Yu. As she spoke up to hear, a hint of helplessness and guilt appeared between Zhuang Yunji's brows. Just because Kong Yu is the successor of the prehistoric Dao court, after such a thing happened, I, as her master, can only be forced by the sex pressure and am unable to help at all. I feel extremely stifled in my heart for Yen'er to suffer such grievances. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep and he said, "What happened later?" Zhuang Yunji smiled bitterly and said, "What else could I do? As her master, I personally apologized to Kong Yu with Yen." Lin Sun frowned and felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. It was ridiculous that the First Orthodoxy in Ziheng Star area chose such a way to deal with a descendant of the primitive Taoism court. It could be imagined how disappointed and aggrieved Lu Qinyan would be when she suffered such a thing. When I went out to the Hongmeng world this time, I wanted to take Yen to relax, but I didn't expect, when Zhuang Yunji said this, there was a touch of coldness in her eyes. In the pavilion, someone secretly colluded with Kong Yu and gathered some forces to monitor Yen, intending to harm her. Really? Lin Sun frowned more and more. Zhuang Yunji sighed lightly. Long ago in the sect, Yen'er suffered a great deal of exclusion and suppression because her display was too outstanding, and many people saw her as a thorn in their side. But I never imagined that they would actually disregard their friendship as fellow disciples and choose to cooperate with Kong Yu. Lin Sun asked, "Is Kong Yu also on the boat?" Zhuang Yunji shook her head. "No, but according to the news I got, Kong Yu sent a group of strong practitioners to the boat." She sighed faintly and continued, "I don't trust some people in my sect anymore. Fellow Taoist, you come from the Yu clan, an imperial clan, and ancestor Green Sun has a close relationship with one of the great elders of the Heavenly Sound Parlor. It'll be safer to have Yen'er stay with you." At this point, Lin Sun finally understood and couldn't help feeling speechless. He came here to hide his identity and planned to go to the Hongmeng world in a low-key manner. Unexpectedly, he encountered such a storm because of the identity of Yu Xian. If the other party was not Lu Qinyan, Lin Sun would never take this matter into his own hands. It was not because of fear or dread, but because he didn't want to cause any trouble. If his identity was recognized, it would be troublesome. But don't worry, if there is any trouble, I, Zhuang Yunji, am not a vegetarian. At that time, I will deal with it freely and will never let you fall into danger. A touch of determination appeared on Zhuang Yunji's beautiful and mature face. Okay. Lin Sun nodded. He was keenly aware that in the eyes of Zhuang Yunji, a peerless Saint King, she didn't value his combat power at all, but the identity of Yu Xian. Thinking about it, the real Yu Xian was just a Saint King. He didn't even set foot on the peerless way. How could Zhuang Yunji place high hopes on him? All she wanted was a trustworthy person to take care of Lu Qinyan. That was all. "Thank you very much. From today on, I will arrange for Yen to live here." Zhuang Yunji chatted with Lin Sun for a while and then left. Sure enough, not long after Zhuang Yunji left, Lu Qinyan, dressed in white and with picturesque features, came again. There was a touch of depression on her beautiful face that could not be erased. There was no one around. Lin Sun wanted to reveal his identity and recognize her several times, but he finally held back. "From today on, you can live in peace with me." Lin Sun's voice was gentle, with a convincing force. Lu Qinyan was stunned. She raised her bright eyes and looked at Lin Sun, seeming a little surprised. Then she bowed her head and said softly, "Thank you, senior." Lin Sun smiled and said, "It's no trouble. It's a piece of cake." Lu Qingyan sighed softly and said no more. From this day on, Lu Qingyan lived in this courtyard. She was often silent. Occasionally, she would play the zither. The sound of the zither was low and bleak, with a hint of indistinct sadness. Lin Sun also knew that if he showed too much concern in his current identity, it would make her think too much. Lu Qingyan didn't want to talk more, so he didn't disturb her. Only when they were having a meal would they have a brief conversation. But most of the time, Lu Qingyan was very silent, as quiet as an orchid. This made Lin Sun feel pity for her. In those days, Lu Qingyan was always smiling, bright and beautiful. How could she be as lonely and silent as she was now? Time flowed like water. More than 10 days had passed in a hurry. Lu Qingyan was also familiar with and adapted to the existence of Lin Sun. But she always regarded Lin Sun as a senior in her heart. She didn't realize that the senior Yu Xian, in her eyes, was an old friend she admired most in those days. These days, Lin Sun didn't stay idle. He concentrated on studying the mysteries of the Nine Cauldrons World Suppression Sutra. With his current realm, he naturally made rapid progress in understanding Taoist Sutra. Now, he had mastered several kinds of Taoism recorded in the Nine Cauldrons World Suppression Sutra, especially one called Nine Cauldrons Battle Seal, which was extremely wonderful and amazed Lin Sun. In addition to these, the Nine Cauldrons World Suppression Sutra also recorded some mysteries of cultivation, involving qi refining, body refining, and spirit refining. When Lin Sun was comprehending it, he was also deeply inspired and often felt enlightened, which made his cultivation a lot better. On this day, Lu Qingyan sat alone in front of the window, composing music and playing the zither. She looked quiet and ethereal, and the sound of the zither was like the sound of nature in an empty valley, ethereal and clear. Lin Sun was pondering the Great Wei Huangting Sutra, and the atmosphere was peaceful and quiet. At this time, Maid Xiaokue suddenly came in a hurry and handed a note to Lin Sun with a perturbed look. She said, "Senior, someone asked me to give it to you." Lin Sun unfolded the note and saw a sentence written in blood-red ink. "Don't worry about other people's business, lest you get into trouble." Every word was wantonly, and the strokes were like sharp blades. The dark red color was penetrating, and a strong killing intent came out of the paper. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed slightly, and his expression remained unchanged. The paper suddenly turned into ashes and disappeared between his fingers. He asked, "Who brought this?" Xiaokue shook her head, looking nervous and uneasy. Chapter 1908. You can leave first. I have something to say to Senior Yu Xian. Lu Qingyan walked out. After watching Xiaokue leave, she looked at Lin Sun with her clear eyes. "Senior, is there trouble?" Lin Sun thought for a while. He didn't hide it, but he didn't say anything either. Lu Qingyan frowned and sighed. Lin Sun asked her to sit down and poured her a cup of tea. Then he asked, "Can you tell me who wants to harm you on this Fuyao boat?" Lu Qingyan was silent for a moment and said, "Since you ask, I won't hide it. It's just that this matter involves the internal strife of the Heavenly Music Pavilion." Lin Sun interrupted with a smile. "Just treat it as a chat. If it's not necessary, I won't do something beyond my power." Lu Qingyan nodded. On this Fuyao boat there were 2 quasi-emperors, 7 saint kings, and dozens of saint kings in the Heavenly Music Pavilion. In addition, there were also some successor disciples, guardians, and retainers. In the matter of targeting Lu Qingyan, one of the 2 quasi-emperors had already expressed his dissatisfaction with Lu Qingyan. This person was Huadian, the supreme elder of the Heavenly Music Pavilion. Among the 7 saint kings, 4 of them were loyal subordinates of Huadian and belonged to the same camp. Lu Qingyan's master, Zhuang Yunji, and another saint king named Shao Yunkong stood on Lu Qingyan's side. Knowing this, Lin Sun quickly thought, That is to say, the other side has 1 quasi-emperor and 4 saint kings, while you only have 2 saint kings, your master and Xiao Yunkong? Lu Qinyan nodded. Lin Sun continued to ask, what about the other quasi-emperor and the last saint king? What's their attitude? Lu Qinyan sighed softly. They should be considered as a bystander. Of these 2 people, one was called Liang Chuan, a quasi-emperor, and the other was called Bu Feiyu, a saint king. They were neutral figures. At this point, Lin Sun completely understood that this situation was extremely unfavorable to Lu Qinyan. Just the fact that the other party had a quasi-emperor was enough to bring endless pressure to Lu Qinyan and her master, Zhuang Yunji. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun's black eyes flickered, and he transmitted his voice. Miss Qinyan, may I ask what you will do if the situation becomes bad and even your master has no power to protect you in the end? Lu Qinyan was stunned, and her beautiful face changed. She said, no matter what, I won't embarrass you. Her voice was calm, but it made Lin's heart skip a beat. He knew that if there was a conflict, Lu Qinyan was likely to sacrifice herself to protect her master. Lu Qinyan said seriously, Senior, it's good that you know these things, but you can't get involved. In order to help Kong you force me to surrender, they will do anything. She was already in such a predicament, yet she was still thinking about Yu Xian, an outsider. Lin Sun sighed with emotion for a while. He nodded. I understand. Lu Qinyan got up to leave and returned to her room. Sitting alone at the stone table in the courtyard, Lin Sun pondered for a long time. He did not fear a quasi-emperor. Even if he did not reveal his identity, he still had the means to kill the quasi-emperor. However, once the quasi-emperor died, it was bound to cause a disturbance. What Lin Sun was thinking about was how not to let the quasi-emperor suspect him in the worst case. It's really difficult to keep a low profile. After a long time, Lin Sun couldn't help but smile bitterly. Well, Miss Qinyan is my old friend anyway. How can I let her be bullied? If I'm really cornered, don't blame me for being rude. A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. On the surface, it seemed to be just an internal battle of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, but Lin Sun knew that although Kong Yu, the successor of the untainted Taoist court, was not on the Fuyao boat, he sent a group of strong people to sneak in. This was also a threat. The untainted Taoist court, Lin Sun suddenly laughed. In Kunlun ruins, he killed countless successors, including Kuan Jilin. How could he be afraid of Kong Yu? I hope you don't provoke me. Lin Sun did intend to hide his identity and keep a low profile. It was better not to attract anyone's attention. But there was a bottom line in keeping a low profile and forbearance. Just like when he first arrived at the ancient wasteland, he was surrounded by enemies, but in the end, didn't he fight his way out? Forbearance didn't mean that he had to become a coward. If so, what was the point of cultivating? From that day on, Lin Sun began to refine some formation treasures such as formation flags, formation discs, and formation talismans in his spare time while practicing the 9 cauldrons world suppression scripture and tempering the 5 internal organs. The Fuyao boat was a giant realm ship, covered with dense and strict Taoist patterns. When it moved on the ancient path of the starry sky, it consumed nearly 500,000 Taoist gems a day. However, it was also because of the many Taoist patterns and formations that made the Fuyao boat extremely strong. When it moved in the starry sky, it could resolve many unpredictable dangers. According to Lin Sun's observation, the power of the formation covering the boat could almost withstand the attack of a quasi-emperor. Unfortunately, the Fuyao ship was only a world ship after all, and not a complete forbidden formation. Otherwise, as long as the power of the formation was controlled, the lives of all the strong people on the boat would be in his hands. Lin Sun didn't expect to control the Fuyao boat. It was enough for him to guard his own territory. In the next few days, Lin Sun became busy. He started to arrange the formation in this quiet and secluded courtyard. Lu Qinyan was surprised. She probably didn't expect that Yu Xian was a Taoist pattern master who was proficient in setting up formations. 7 days later, Lin Sun stopped and showed a satisfied smile. In the courtyard, he set up a large Taoist pattern formation with both defense and binding. It was called the Forbidden Formation of the Stars. When it was running, it could communicate with the power of the stars in the starry sky. Even if the Saint King was trapped, he couldn't get out of it for a while. And what Lin Sun paid was a sum of divine materials that were worth about 1,000,000 Tao crystals. The price was amazing. In the past, Lin Sun couldn't afford it at all. It was also when he was in the Diyu secret realm that all the great figures from the 9 great worlds were completely annihilated by him, and because of this, he obtained an astronomical windfall. Just the number of Tao crystals he had on him right now was 9,000,000. This didn't include the mountains of divine materials, elixirs, and rare treasures. It could be said that Lin Sun was now rich and didn't have to worry about Taoist gems for a long time. Miss Qinyan, keep this jade talisman. Lin Sun found Lu Qinyan and handed her a specially refined jade talisman. He said, "If you encounter any emergency, crush this talisman, and I will know immediately." "Thank you, Senior." Lu Qinyan showed gratitude. She didn't take Yu Xian seriously before. She only regarded him as an elder and never expected that he could really help and protect her. However, after interacting with him for some time, she realized that this senior Yu Xian was very attentive when it came to acting as her bodyguard. Of course, that was all. Lu Qinyan knew that once she was in danger, she could only rely on her master, Zhuang Yunji. After all, the opponent was too strong. It was so strong that Lu Qinyan didn't dare to have any hope for Yu Xian. It was even to the extent that she was worried that her master might not be able to hold on. Lin Sun naturally saw that Lu Qinyan, like her master, just regarded him as an ordinary guard. But he couldn't explain anything. He smiled and turned away. On the same day, Lin Sun called Oki and Dong Yi and told them that they didn't need to serve him anymore. Although they didn't understand the reason, the 2 women obeyed and left soon. In the evening, a man in a blue robe came and stood outside the courtyard. He said loudly, "Junior Sister Lu, Senior Sister Wu Yunlian said that she invited you to visit the House of Treasures." "Wu Yunlian?" Lu Qinyan, who was playing the zither in the room, narrowed her eyes. How could it be her? Before she could reply, Lin Sun said in the courtyard, "Miss Qinyan is in closed-door cultivation. I'm afraid you can't go out for a while. Please go back." Outside the courtyard, the man in a blue robe frowned. "Are you Yu Xian from the Yu family? I'm talking to Junior Sister Lu. You'd better not interrupt." Even Lu Qinyan had to call Yu Xian, who was disguised by Lin Sun, Senior, but this man in a blue robe called him directly by his name and spoke rudely. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and thought of the note he received a few days ago. Did this man think that he could only endure after being warned and threatened? He got up directly and walked out of the courtyard. Senior Lu Qingyan's heart tightened. She was about to dissuade him, but Lin Sun waved his hand and smiled. He secretly transmitted a voice message to the man, telling him to leave it to him. "Young man, haven't your elders taught you how to respect your elders?" Lin Sun opened the gate of the courtyard and said indifferently. The man in a blue robe was stunned and pointed to his nose. "Are you teaching me a lesson?" Lin Sun crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against the door. He looked up and down at the man in a blue robe and said with a sneer, "Little thing, don't be so rude. If we were in the outside world, I would have killed you. Now, you'd better disappear." The man in a blue robe was furious. "Yu Xian, do you really think you're a big shot?" Lin Sun sighed and looked around. He seemed to be talking to himself. "A junior dares to bully me. If this goes back, the ancestors of the Yu family will scold me as a coward." The man in a blue robe sneered. "Yu Xian, this is the Fuyao boat, the territory of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. I've shown you enough respect by letting you stay here. If you don't know what's good for you, you'd better be careful of getting yourself into trouble." There was a strong threat in his voice. Lin Sun didn't know who gave the man in a blue robe the courage to be so domineering. "If I beat you now, I'll definitely be regarded as a bully. Well, I'll spare you this time and let you go for the time being." Bang! After that, Lin Sun closed the gate of the courtyard directly. Chapter 1909. Humph, what you family! Just a good-for-nothing. The blue-robed man cursed in a low voice and turned away. Behind the door of the courtyard, Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep. At the moment when he opened the door of the courtyard, with his spiritual awareness, he instantly captured at least 5 strong breaths in the nearby area. All of them were Sage King realm experts. As for the blue-robed man, he was nothing at all. He was just a great saint. But if he really took action, these 5 king saints would inevitably be drawn out. At that time, the other party was very likely to take the opportunity to capture the Yu Xian he pretended to be. Even if he could suppress them in the end, he was bound to expose some of his strength and arouse their vigilance. Next time, the other party was very likely to use more sinister means to deal with him. At this moment, Lin Sun could roughly judge that the purpose of the blue-robed man was either to test him or to provoke him. Otherwise, he would not have behaved so arrogantly and recklessly. "Senior, I'm sorry to let you suffer." Lu Qingyan came over apologetically. She had clearly heard the conversation between Lin Sun and the blue-robed man just now. Lin Sun's cowardice made her breathe a sigh of relief, but she couldn't help feeling disappointed. Sure enough, the senior invited from Yu family was just a guard. "It's just a puppy barking. It's not enough to make me suffer." Lin Sun smiled. He really didn't care about this. If it weren't for the wrong time, the blue-robed man would have been killed by him like an ant. "Who is he?" Lin Sun asked. Lu Qingyan said, "Zhan Bing, a successor disciple of Heavenly Sound Pavilion. His master is Ouyang Pei, an elder of King Saints. He has always been hostile to me." "What about Wu Yunlian?" Lin Sun continued to ask. Lu Qingyan frowned with a touch of disgust. "She is the granddaughter of Huadian, the Supreme Elder. Among the peers in Heavenly Sound Pavilion, she is also the one who stands up for me. She united some other disciples to exclude and be hostile to me." Lin Sun suddenly understood. Treasure House. It was located on a beautiful mountain on the boat. This was the area of Heavenly Sound Pavilion. Outsiders were not allowed to approach without invitation. At this moment, in the great hall on the first floor of the House of Treasures, a group of direct disciples from the court of Tian-Yin were gathered together. There were both males and females, and all of them looked extraordinary. The person that sat at the seat of the host was a woman that wore a luxurious robe and possessed an outstanding appearance. Her skin was snow-white, her bearing was elegant, and the space between her brows carried a wisp of innate pride and aloofness. Wu Yunlian. She was the granddaughter of the Quasi-Emperor Supreme Elder, Huadian. Among the true inheritors of the Heavenly Music Pavilion, she held an esteemed position. Ha, and here I thought that the Yu clan, an imperial clan, was something extraordinary. Who would have thought that it was actually a bunch of idiots? He is a smart man. He would rather swallow his anger than fight against us. Obviously, he also realized that if he stood on Lu Qingyan's side, he would definitely die miserably. When the blue-robed man, Zhan Bing, returned and recounted everything that had occurred earlier, a wave of roaring laughter instantly resounded in the hall. Yu Xian, a sage king from the imperial Yu clan, could only swallow his anger when he was humiliated by a peaked great saint like Zhan Bing. This made everyone feel very disdainful. Someone said leisurely, "Our martial uncle Zhuang Yunji is going to be disappointed this time." Everyone burst into laughter again. Wu Yunlian, who was sitting at the head of the host, sighed softly. "Unfortunately, I had planned to let you provoke Yu Xian and seize the opportunity to capture him. In this way, Lu Qingyan, that little bitch, would no longer have a caretaker by her side, and we could find a chance to force her to bow her head." Everyone's laughter faded. Senior Sister Wu, this Yu Xian is just a sage king. If we really fight, how can he protect Lu Qingyan? Someone said. Wu Yunlian frowned and said, My grandfather said that Yu Xian is a member of the Yu clan, an imperial clan, and his identity is different. He told us not to offend him too much. Otherwise, he would have died as early as the first day he set foot on the boat. Someone couldn't help but ask, Senior Sister Wu, what do you think we should do? Wu Yunlian pondered for a long time, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. We can't go too far, but it doesn't mean that others can't. Everyone's eyes flickered. Wu Yunlian made a decision. Zhan Bing, go and meet the experts sent by young Master Kong Yu. Tell them that if they can get rid of Yu Xian, capturing Lu Qingyan will be as easy as taking something out of their pocket. Zhan Bing nodded and left. Someone asked, Senior Sister Wu, if this matter is known by Martial Uncle Zhuang Yunji. Wu Yunlian suddenly showed a cold smile. Martial Uncle Zhuang Yunji? I'm afraid she can't even take care of herself now. What do you mean? Everyone's spirits were lifted. Wu Yunlian said leisurely, My grandfather has personally come forward and had a long talk with Martial Uncle Xiao Yunkong. I believe there will be a good result. Xiao Yunkong, an elder of the Sage King realm, was the only big shot of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion standing next to Zhuang Yunji on the boat. If he no longer supported Zhuang Yunji, one could imagine how embarrassed Zhuang Yunji's situation would become. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but laugh. Would Martial Uncle Xiao Yunkong be able to withstand such pressure with Supreme Elder Hua Dian stepping forward? It would be very difficult. Hearing Xian Pavilion. In Zhuang Yunji's living quarters, the atmosphere was extremely gloomy. Zhuang Yunji's expression was cold, and her eyes were filled with undisguised disappointment and anger. She sat there without saying a word. She was trying hard to control her emotions. Junior sister, from today onwards, you will cultivate in seclusion here. On a chair opposite, a man in a black robe sighed softly, not daring to look at Zhuang Yunji. This person was the great sage stage elder of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, Xiao Yunkong. He was the only powerhouse standing next to Zhuang Yunji. However, from today onwards, Xiao Yunkong's attitude had changed. Xiao Yunkong, you disappoint me. Zhuang Yunji said each word slowly, unable to hide the disappointment between her brows. Even her closest senior brother had betrayed her. This made her heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. Junior sister, this is the general trend. I have no choice. Moreover, with just the two of us, how can we compete with Martial Uncle Huadian? Xiao Yunkong said bitterly. You can choose not to help me. Even if you just stand by and watch, I won't blame you. However, you are helping them monitor me and preventing me from leaving this place. Xiao Yunkong, you are too shameless. Zhuang Yunji's voice was cold. On the other side, the white-haired old man who had been sitting silently all this time smiled and said, Junior sister, junior brother Xiao is doing this for your own good. Qingyan is very talented, but she doesn't know what's good for her. If she really cares about you, she should obediently bow her head and leave with young Master Kong Yu, instead of implicating you like this. He was Zhan Bing's master, Ouyang Pei, a great sage stage elder. This time, he and Xiao Yunkong were guarding this place and monitoring Zhuang Yunji, not allowing her to go out without permission. Simply speaking, the current Zhuang Yunji was equivalent to being grounded. Bullshit. Zhuang Yunji trembled with anger. If I can't even protect my disciple, how can I, as a master, still have the face to stand in this world? The white-haired elder, Ouyang Pei's face darkened. Junior sister, I'm not afraid to tell you that if you act recklessly now, not only will junior brother Xiao and I stop you, even Martial Uncle Huadian will not stand by and watch. Zhuang Yunji had the impulse to kill them several times, but she finally restrained herself. She looked dazed and struggled with her emotions. After a long time she sighed dejectedly, For the first time in my life, I am so disappointed in the sect. Xiao Yunkong couldn't bear it, but he just shook his head in the end. Ouyang Pei smiled. Zhuang Yunji had become a bird in a cage, and it was difficult to get out of it. Now, it seemed that the only thing left was to kick away the eyesore from Yu family in the courtyard. Lu Qinyan suddenly found Lin Sun, who was practicing, and said, "Senior, I want to see Master." "What's wrong?" Lin Sun saw at a glance that Lu Qinyan was in a bad mood. Lu Qinyan said in a low voice, "Master and I agreed that she would come to see me every 10 days. But now, more than 10 days have passed. I am worried about her." Lin Sun frowned and thought about it. From the first time Zhuang Yunji brought Lu Qinyan to the present, Zhuang Yunji had not appeared again these days. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun said, "Miss Qinyan, let's consider the worst result. Now, if something really happens to your master, I'm afraid you can't help her. Instead, you will be taken advantage of by others." Lu Qingyan's beautiful face was slightly pale, and she said in a daze, "If I die, Master should not be implicated anymore, right?" Lin Sun's heart tightened. He stared at her for a moment and said, "Miss Qinyan, give me some time. I will help you inquire about the news. How about making a decision after confirming the specific matters?" Lu Qinyan was quite surprised and said, "Senior, if you go out, I am afraid you will encounter an accident. What's more, if you are involved, I will certainly feel guilty." Lin Sun felt pity in his heart and said, "I will give you a chance and give me a chance. What's more, I will give it a try. It's always a hope, isn't it?" As he said, he walked out and said, "You stay here. With the protection of the formation, Holy King Desolate can't break in. And if there is an accident, you must crush the jade talisman I gave you in time." His voice was gentle and indifferent. Watching Lin Sun's figure leave, Lu Qinyan was stunned for a while. She suddenly felt that she had never seen through this senior, Yu Xian. When Zhan Bing humiliated him with evil words, he finally endured it, which made him look a little timid and disappointed her. But now, he had made a decision so casually to help her. Didn't he know that he was very likely to encounter an accident by doing so? Thinking of this, Lu Qingyan's heart tightened. She was about to chase after him to dissuade him, but found that Lin Sun had already disappeared in the courtyard. Only strands of chilly silver starlight enshrouded the courtyard, and it was dreamlike, illusory, beautiful, and pure. This was the power of Stars' forbidden formation. Chapter 1910. The moment Lin Sun walked out of the courtyard, the smile on his face disappeared completely. 5 people, King of Sages. In an instant, his sea of consciousness clearly captured the aura of strong practitioners hidden in different areas. He didn't pay them any attention and continued walking forward. The rocking ship was extremely large, like a floating continent. Streets crisscrossed it, and there were many buildings that were arranged row upon row. It was like a city. The courtyard where Lin Sun lived was on a mountain outside the city. This mountain was specially set up by the Heavenly Sound Pavilion to entertain distinguished guests. There were many courtyards. "Buddy, it looks like you're in a bad situation." When Lin Sun passed a courtyard, a figure suddenly appeared on the wall. He lay there lazily and stared at Lin Sun with a smile. "Oh, how do you know?" Lin Sun glanced at the man. He looked like a teenager in linen clothes. His hair was like wild grass, and his face was quite handsome. When he smiled, his white teeth were revealed. The youth rolled his eyes and said, "Even a blind man can see that. Is there a need to ask? Brother, let me guess. Are you going to fight with your life on the line?" "Fight with my life? I don't think so," Lin Sun said and strode away. The identity of this teenager was bound to be unusual since he could live on this mountain. But Lin Sun didn't bother to pay attention to him. "Tut tut. Although your heart is thundering, your face is still as calm as a lake. Although your murderous intent is restrained to the extreme, I still smell it." The teenager leaned on the wall and looked at the place where Lin Sun left, laughing happily. "Young master, you can't be nosy. Your father told me not to let you make trouble along the way. Otherwise, he won't spare this old woman. A senile old woman stood under the wall of the inner courtyard. She looked at the young man in linen clothes lying on the wall with a smile on her face. Her turbid eyes were filled with kindness. "Granny, if you smile at me with your real face, I'll be very happy. But I can't stand your ugly face." The teenager turned back and stuck out his tongue, pretending to vomit. The old woman laughed so hard that her eyes narrowed. "You're just like your father when he was young. You're shameless and smelly." The hemp-clothed youth did not feel ashamed. Instead, he felt proud and smiled proudly. However, when he looked in the direction of Lin Sun's departure, a strange light flashed in his eyes, and he thought to himself, "This guy is obviously a wolf in sheep's clothing. Whoever provokes him will have bad luck." "Granny, do you want to go and watch the fun? That guy is very interesting," the hemp-clothed youth suddenly asked. "No." The old woman flatly refused. The linen-clothed youth's face instantly turned bitter, and he sighed endlessly. As he walked down the mountain, he saw a bustling street not far away. Tourists weaved in and out, and there was an endless stream of horses and carriages. Lin Sun walked into the street as if he was taking a stroll. All along the way, he saw disciples from large sections. There were both men and women, and they came and went in groups with many lackeys by their side. There were also lone cultivators, but not many of them. After all, not everyone had the money to cross the starry sky on a support boat. There were no cultivators in the lower 5 realms here. Even longevity tribulation eminences were insignificant characters who ran errands. On the contrary, it was common to see sages and great sages. There were also some sage kings, but they were all elders of some top forces and ancient clans who played the role of guardians. This was the scene on the support boat. In the vast Ziheng star zone, there were hundreds of millions of people, but only a small group of people at the top of the world were qualified to board the support boat. Walking in the streets, Lin Sun was like a tourist, shuttling through all kinds of shops. When he walked out of the shops, Lin Sun had many rare treasures, elixirs and divine materials from all over the world. Even Lin Sun had to admit that these shops were very unique. The items they sold were all rare treasures unique to the major star areas and worlds of the starry sky ancient path. Lin Sun couldn't help but widen his horizons. Of course, the Tao gems on Lin Sun also flowed out like running water. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Lin Sun entered a martial arts training hall and paid 3,000 Tao gems in exchange for a quiet room for cultivation. The rental time was 6 hours. Although it was called a quiet room for cultivation, it was actually no different from a small abode. The spiritual energy inside was incomparably abundant, and it was covered in restrictive formations, so there was no need to worry about being disturbed by the outside world. Spending 3,000 Tao crystal in 6 hours, one could imagine just how great the expense was, and ordinary people would not be able to afford it. Not long after Lin Sun entered the quiet room, a group of experts arrived at the martial arts training hall. The leader was a young man in a bright red robe with a white jade belt around his waist. His eyes were narrow and long like blades. A gray-robed old man who had been waiting there for a long time went up to greet them. He was a sage king realm elder of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, and he was also the manager of the martial arts training hall. Those who were familiar with him called him Old Tang. "This is the token. The target has entered the cultivation room C3. Old Tang stepped forward and respectfully handed a token to the red-robed young man. "All right." The red-robed young man nodded, and then he led the group towards the cultivation room C3. This eyesore from the Yu clan is really courting death. Old Tang couldn't help but reveal a wisp of coldness as he watched the red-robed young man and the others leave. A disciple of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion walked over and said with a worried expression, "Elder, if Elder Zhuang Yunji finds out that we handed over the token to open the cultivation room without permission," Old Tang interrupted him and said, "Elder Zhuang Yunji is like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river, and he can't even protect himself. There's no need to pay any attention to him. Not to mention that even if that fellow surnamed you dies, it's unrelated to our heavenly sound pavilion. Alright, go do what you need to do. I'll keep an eye on this place. The cultivation room C3. Along with a wave of fluctuations of restrictions, the door to the cultivation room was opened from the outside. The red-robed young man and the others charged in at their fastest speed, and they closed the door at the first possible moment, causing it to be covered by the energy of restrictions once more. When they finished doing all of this, they noticed to their shock that the target this time didn't reveal any expression of surprise or panic. He sat before a wooden table, and he was drinking wine from an azure-skinned gourd. He had a relaxed bearing, and he seemed as if he'd been waiting for their arrival. "You Xian?" The red-robed young man spoke, and his long and narrow eyes were suffused with a frightening divine light. "This place is isolated from the outside world, and it can withstand the destructive power of the Saint King realm. It can be called the best place to kill and bury people. What do you think of the tomb I've chosen for you?" Lin Sun stood up and said indifferently. His black eyes were deep and tranquil. The red-robed young man's face darkened, and the others also looked incredulous. Was this guy from the Yu clan a fool? He was just a Saint King, but he was so arrogant. "Do you know we're going to deal with you?" The red-robed young man raised his eyebrows. "I only know that no matter who comes here today, they can only be buried here," Lin Sun said, and his figure disappeared out of thin air. "Do it." The red-robed young man's pupils shrank, and his body exuded the horrible aura of the Saint King realm. He did not hesitate to hit out with his palm. The power of his palm was vast, and it was like the great power of the primeval world descending to the world. "Die." When Lin Sun said this word lightly, his figure appeared in front of the red-robed young man, and he also hit out with his palm. It was an understatement, without a trace of smoke and fire. But under this palm, the tyrannical palm of the red-robed young man was swallowed up silently like a clay ox entering the sea. His whole body seemed to fall into an abyss, and it was dark in front of him. His whole body seemed to be imprisoned, and he could not struggle at all. When this palm fell, bang! The red-robed young man was smashed into a mass of flesh and blood. As soon as the blood splashed out, it was erased in the void. Only his power of the Great Way was completely swallowed and plundered. A peerless Saint King was killed with one palm. This sudden scene happened too fast and too terrifying. It made the other strong people who were just about to take action stunned at first, and then their blood ran cold, and their souls almost left their bodies. Was this the power that a Saint King could have? The atmosphere was dead silent, and everyone's expression changed greatly. The red-robed young man was the successor of the primitive Dao court. Although his status and identity were far inferior to Kong Yu, his combat power was undoubtedly strong. Being able to step into the peerless Saint King realm was the best proof. But now, he was killed with one palm, as if he was swatting a fly. Lin Sun's eyes were gloomy as he said indifferently, "Everyone, I need to ask some questions. If you cooperate obediently, you can die more quickly. Otherwise, you can only live a life worse than death." As he spoke, he attacked without hesitation. "Why are they still not coming out?" Old Tang's brows gradually furrowed. In the martial practice field, as time passed, the red-robed young man and his party did not walk out of room C3 for a long time, which made Old Tang feel a little uneasy. "It's just killing a Saint King. Why did it take so long? Could it be that something really happened?" Old Tang's expression was uncertain. Just as he was deciding whether to go and see for himself, he suddenly saw a figure walk out of room C3. But Old Tang's eyes suddenly widened as if he was struck by lightning, as if he had seen a ghost. How could it be him? He saw that the man was dressed in green, with broad eyebrows and long hair. It was Yu Xian, whom Old Tang thought would definitely die. "Are you surprised? Are you surprised?" Lin Sun's figure appeared out of thin air, and he looked at Old Tang with eyes as deep as an abyss. Sweat ran down Old Tang's forehead, and he struggled to show a stiff smile. What are you saying? I don't understand. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. I'll come to you again later. As Lin Sun said, he put one hand on Old Tang's shoulder. Old Tang only felt a terrifying force pressing down on him, and all his strength was confined before he could struggle at all. Then, he was picked up by Lin Sun like a chick and stuffed into the Endless Way Tower. The next moment, Lin Sun's figure flashed and he floated away from the martial practice field. From beginning to end, no one noticed his trace except Old Tang. Because from the moment he took action, he had already operated by Qi, which completely covered his figure and Qi. His whole person seemed to be nothingness. Chapter 1911. The streets were bustling with noise and excitement. The boat belonged to the Heavenly Sound School. No matter how distinguished the passengers were, they dared not make trouble on the boat under normal circumstances. After all, the existence of the two great figures of the quasi-emperor realm in the Heavenly Sound School played a great deterrent role. But no one knew that a killing had already taken place in a quiet room isolated from the outside world in the martial practice hall. Snow Drinking House. In an elegant room on the second floor, a group of people were drinking. Each of them was dignified and had an extraordinary appearance. The shopkeeper of the restaurant had already been told that this group of distinguished people should be treated with the best wine and the best dishes. Moreover, no one was allowed to disturb these guests unless it was an ordinary matter. Lin Sun appeared in the Snow Drinking House, which was bustling with business and bustling with people. There was no lack of powerful senior cultivators. However, from the beginning to the end, no one had sensed his presence. Under the cover of the Qi of Qi, no one could detect Lin Sun's existence at all, unless it was an expert with special talent or a terrifying figure whose cultivation was far higher than Lin Sun's. This was the wonderful transformation of the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon and the Great Path Furnace Scripture. Dragons could roam the void, but they could hide in the nothingness and no one would know them. Lin Sun walked up to the second floor of the restaurant, which had long been forbidden by the shopkeeper. He stood in the quiet room for a moment and waved his hand to set up a restriction formation. Then, he gently knocked on the door. "Who is it? Didn't I tell you not to disturb our gathering?" A displeased voice came from the room. "The matter of the martial practice hall has come to an end," Lin Sun said calmly. The lively atmosphere in the quiet room quieted down. Then, the door was opened, revealing the figure of a bearded man. He looked at Lin Sun with a little doubt and asked, "Who told you to come?" "Shui Weiliang." Lin Sun said a name. This name belonged to the red-robed man, but he was already dead. Although he felt that Lin Sun's reaction was a little strange, the bearded man's expression eased a lot. He said, "Come in and tell me the result." Lin Sun walked into the quiet room, glanced at the 5 people present and said, "Shui Weiliang said he was waiting for you to reunite underground." The curly-bearded man's expression changed. But before he could react, his neck was grabbed by Lin Sun's big hand. Almost at the same time, a Dao domain that resembled a cauldron or an abyss spread out from Lin Sun's body, enveloping the entire chamber. An incomparably dull rumbling sound rang out, but it quickly disappeared into silence. When Lin Sun withdrew the field of Tao, the 6 strongmen from the primitive Taoist court who had been talking and laughing in the quiet room were all killed. Among them, 1 absolute sage king, 2 sage kings, and 3 absolute great sages were Kong Yu's fans. However, all of them had perished without exception, and not even their corpses remained. On the dining table, the delicacies were still piping hot, and the fragrant wine had just been filled, but there was no one to enjoy it. Lin Sun took out his green gourd, raised his head and took a sip. Then he turned around and walked out of the quiet room. After that, he removed the formation that covered the surroundings and floated away. The restaurant was still bustling with noise and excitement. Walking on the bustling street, Lin soon went to the next target. Before killing the red-robed man and his companions in the quiet room, Lin Sun had used all kinds of torture to extract their souls one by one, and finally got the information he wanted. For example, the number of strongmen sent by Kong Yu this time, as well as their combat strength, names, appearances, locations, and so on. After a while, Lin Sun walked into a brothel called Man Tingfang. In the Heaven Class A VIP room, more than a dozen beautiful women with different manners and temperament, dressed in light gauze skirts, danced gracefully in the room, and the attractive curves of their bodies were faintly discernible. These beautiful women came from different small worlds and belonged to different ethnic groups, so the beauty and temptation they showed were also different. A man in a purple robe, with his upper body bare, was holding a woman in his arms, drinking and having fun. One of his hands was wandering up and down the woman's proud and delicate body. Neither the women nor the man in a purple robe noticed that a figure had already stood in the room, watching them coldly. Hui Xin. Lin Sun didn't waste time and called out a name. Who? The man in a purple robe, who was having fun, froze. Whoosh. For a moment, the room was covered by a dark abyss as if it were an eternal night. When Lin Sun left, there were many beautiful women who had fainted on the ground, but the man in a purple robe was nowhere to be seen. After 15 minutes, Lin Sun walked into a business specializing in selling elixirs. In an alchemy room, a dignified old man with white hair and beard was controlling a fiery red cauldron to refine an elixir. Moreover, it had already reached a critical juncture. Tong quickly bring me the last divine material. The old man looked solemn and stared at the constantly roaring cauldron. The door of the alchemy room opened and a figure came in. He glanced at the fiercely burning cauldron and suddenly said, "This furnace of elixirs is going to be destroyed." The old man's body stiffened. He suddenly raised his head and showed a look of anger. "Who are you? How dare you disturb my refining?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "Look, the elixirs are ruined." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a bang. The airflow in the cauldron vibrated, making a buzzing and trembling sound, followed by rolling white eyes with a burnt smell. The old man was furious. "I'll kill you!" Puff! As soon as he finished speaking, a broken blade swept out and cut off the old man's throat. His head was thrown into the air and caught by Lin Sun. In the following time, Lin Sun's figure appeared in different places one after another, like a silent god of death, reaping lives one after another. On the way back to his residence, Lin Sun counted with his fingers and found that it took him about an hour to return. This made him frown a little. It was not fast enough, however, the effect was still very good. Those who should be killed had been killed. It could be regarded as a quite satisfactory action. Walking up the mountain road, Lin Sun keenly noticed that some strong practitioners of Heavenly Sound Pavilion hiding in the dark seemed to be a little impatient, and there were some extremely subtle fluctuations in their breath. Probably, they didn't expect that they could return alive. Lin Sun shook his head and continued to move forward. "Bro, you can still come back alive. Amazing." As he passed by the courtyard, the disheveled head of the young man in linen poked out from the top of the wall and looked at Lin Sun with amazement. "This is the boat of Heavenly Sound Pavilion. Who dares to harm me?" Lin Sun said casually. He suddenly stopped and looked at the young man in linen, saying, "Curiosity kills. You're still young, so you'd better know your place." After saying that, he swaggered away. The young man in linen spat and snorted, acting like an old man. "You're obviously not that old, but you pretend to be profound. You're not likable at all." His eyeballs spun about and he said, "Granny, the smell of blood on this guy's body is very fresh. I suspect that quite a few people have died on the support boat this time. Haha, I'm afraid there's going to be a good show to watch." In the courtyard, the old woman had a helpless expression on her face. "Young master, it's one thing to watch the show, but you can't interfere. You should know that the conversation between you and that person just now has already been witnessed by others. If that person really does something shameful and bloody, I'm afraid others will suspect you." The young man in linen said indifferently, "Let them suspect me. I'm not afraid of the sky falling down anyway, Granny." The old woman glared at the young man and couldn't help laughing. Her eyes were full of affection. "You brat, you're relying on me for the rest of your life." The young man in linen grinned. Yes, I'm relying on you for the rest of my life. If my father allows me to be independent in the future, I don't want anything and I won't fight for anything. I just want Granny to follow me. If my father doesn't allow it, I won't give in even half a step, even if I cry, throw a tantrum, or hang myself." The old woman convulsed with laughter and finally said with a little emotion, "Finally, I didn't dote on you for nothing." In another courtyard, when Lin Sun returned, Lu Qinyan, who had been waiting in the courtyard, breathed a long sigh of relief. "Senior, did you find out any news?" Lu Qinyan was still worried about the safety of her master. Lin Sun naturally would not forget this and said, "Your master is now in closed-door training in Wenxian Pavilion, guarded by Xiao Yunkong and Ouyang Pei. His life is not in danger." "Guarded?" Lu Qingyan's heart trembled and her pretty face turned pale. She said, "They obviously grounded my master." Lin Sun's eyes were calm and he said gently, "Do you know what happened on my way back?" Lu Qingyan was stunned and barely controlled her mood. She said, "Senior, do you think I still have the mood to pay attention to other things now?" Lin Sun said helplessly, "It's also related to you." Lu Qingyan was surprised. "Me?" "Yes, I heard that some mishap befell the experts of the antiquity Dao court who entered the boat. I wasn't able to find out the specifics, but I believe there will be news very soon," Lin Sun said vaguely. Lu Qingyan's delicate body was slightly stiff, and then she opened her eyes wide. "Senior, you don't have to comfort me. This boat originally belongs to the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. Who dared to harm the primitive Tao court?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "Believe it or not, just wait for the news." Lu Qingyan looked at Lin Sun and finally suppressed her doubts and nodded. That night, in the number 3 cultivation quiet room of the Martial Training Hall, a maid opened the door of the quiet room and was about to tidy up the room when she suddenly let out a scream of horror. Then, the whole Martial Training Hall was alarmed. This matter was so bloody that it couldn't be hidden at all. Soon the news came out, Xue Weiliang, the successor of primitive Tao court, and others died tragically. The big shots of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion sitting on the boat were alarmed at the first time. They put down what they were doing and hurried to investigate. This night was destined to be turbulent. Not long after the bloody incident in the Martial Training Hall, amazing things happened in different places in other areas of the boat. Thanks to Huang Lianping, TJ Hauda 7 and other children for their gift. Yesterday, Goldfish posted an article on WeChat, in which there was a portrait in line with the temperament of Lu Qingyan. Those who were interested could open WeChat, search for the WeChat public account Xiaojinyu 233, add a follower, and check the history. Chapter 1912. Under the night sky, the brightly lit boat had fallen into chaos, and sharp cries rose and fell from time to time. Panic, uneasiness, and astonishment seemed to ferment as it suffused the hearts of every single cultivator on the boat. Group after group of experts from the Heavenly Music Pavilion rode dazzling streaks of light and appeared at the martial practice grounds, Snow Drinking House, Man Tingfang, and so on. After that, a piece of news spread like a thunderclap on this chaotic and turbulent boat that was lit up like a dragon. 7 people died at the martial practice grounds, 1 extreme Saint King and 6 Saint Kings. The deceased were all experts of the primordial Dao court. Room C3, the smell of blood is dense. Rumor has it that the person in charge of the martial practice grounds, Old Tang, is missing. Snow Drinking House, 6 great figures from the primordial Dao court have mysteriously disappeared as if they'd evaporated into thin air, and they didn't leave any traces behind. Rumor has it that the second floor of the Snow drinking house was restricted at that time, yet such a strange incident occurred. The manager of the restaurant has already been captured and is being interrogated. Man Tingfong, Heaven Grade VIP Pavilion, the heir of the primordial Tao Court, Hui Zien, has disappeared, and only a pile of clothes and a few dozen unconscious brothel girls were left behind. An outstanding heir of the primordial Tao Court is actually so licentious. This is an enormous scandal, and all of this news has been sealed by the Heavenly Music Pavilion. Pill Cauldron Shop, the head of the primordial Tao Court's outer court elder, Rui Feng, has been taken away. Jade Grass Shop, the soul of the primordial Tao Court's outer court deacon, Chu Fu, has been wiped out. Every single piece of news could be said to be like a storm, and when this string of news spread out together, the boat had completely fallen into an upheaval. No matter which top power the passengers on the boat were from, whether they were geniuses, nobles, or immortals, all of them were shocked and anxious. The boat was the world ship of the Heavenly Music Pavilion, yet such a bloody incident had occurred tonight. How could anyone not be shocked? The most horrifying thing was that those who were either killed or mysteriously disappeared were all from the primordial Tao Court. It was one of the 6 great Tao Courts of the Starry Sky Ancient Path, and any random disciple from it would be treated as a distinguished guest of the highest rank in any other world. For example, the Heavenly Music Pavilion was the #1 orthodoxy in the Purple Hung Starfield, but compared to the antediluvian Tao Court, the difference was like heaven and earth. But now, a group of experts from the primordial Tao Court, regardless of their status, were all dead. This was simply like a great earthquake, and the storm and effect it created was sufficient to cause any cultivator on the boat to be horrified. Who is the murderer? This was what everyone was most concerned about. Heavenly Music Parlor is in big trouble. There were also many people who speculated that along with the death of these primordial Tao Court experts on the support ship, the Heavenly Music Pavilion was bound to be affected. In a dazzling golden hall, the Supreme Elder of the Heavenly Music Pavilion, Hua Dian, had a gloomy expression as he sat there silently. His hair was black as ink, and he wore a wide-sleeved Confucian robe. His eyes were deep like whirlpools, and they were suffused with a terrifying divine glow. The 4 ultimate Sage Kings, the group of Sage Kings, and Wu Yunlian and the other successors of the Heavenly Music Pavilion all stood there, silent like cicadas in winter. Every single one of their expressions was difficult to conceal their bewilderment, astonishment, uneasiness, anger, and other emotions. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it was almost suffocating. Elder, we've already counted the experts from the primordial Tao Court. A total of 19 people, all of them have disappeared. A trembling voice sounded outside the hall, breaking the silence. Boom. Everyone felt as if they were struck by lightning, and their hearts twitched violently. What about those people who mysteriously disappeared? Could it be that they really vanished into thin air? This is the support ship and it's in the starry sky. As long as they're alive, it's impossible for them to leave the support ship. Wu Yunlian berated. Outside the hall, the trembling voice continued, "We've already searched every corner of the support ship, but we haven't found any traces of them. Trash." Wu Yunlian cursed angrily. Right at this moment, Hua Dian, who sat at the seat of honor, took a deep breath and said, "Only the dead will be silently erased from the world." His words made everyone's heart sink. The successors of the primordial Tao Court sent by Kong Yu had died on the Heavenly Music Pavilion's support ship. Even if they did not do it, they would definitely be implicated. When they thought of this, everyone was shocked and furious. "Where's the murderer? Haven't you found him yet?" Hua Dian's voice was low and carried a bone-piercing coldness, and the rage that had accumulated in his heart was on the verge of erupting. Outside the main hall, the Heavenly Music Parlor elder who came to report fell to his knees with a thud. He said bitterly, "The murderer did not leave any traces, and did not attract anyone's attention when he committed the crime. Right now, we are still investigating. Wu Yunlian suddenly said. Could it be Yu Xian? Today, she had instructed Zhan Bing to borrow the hands of the experts of the primordial Dao court to get rid of Yu Xian, but today, such a bloody thing had actually happened. Moreover, Wu Yunlian had already received news that before this bloody incident occurred, Yu Xian had left his residence and entered the rocking boat to cause trouble. Originally, in Wu Yunlian's opinion, this guy was destined to be a dead man. But who would have thought that Yu Xian would return alive, and the experts of the primordial Dao court would all suffer? Impossible! That guy is just a king of sages. If he could really do this, I can even commit suicide by slitting my throat. Yu Xian? That's a good-for-nothing who only knows how to admit defeat. Instantly, many people in the main hall shook their heads. There was no lack of peak king of sages among the experts of the primordial Dao court who died tragically on the rocking boat. Moreover, they appeared in groups, so how could they be killed by a king of sages? In everyone's opinion, to be able to do this silently and without alerting anyone, it had to be at least a quasi-emperor. In fact, it was very likely that the murderer was not just one person, because the experts of the primordial Dao court who died on the rocking boat could be distributed in different places. Wu Yunlian thought about it and also felt that her speculation was too ridiculous and could not stand up to scrutiny. She immediately shook her head and removed Yu Xian from her mind. She took a deep breath and gnashed her teeth. Even if it was not done by Yu Xian, it must have something to do with Lu Qinyan. Her words made everyone's hearts tremble. Indeed, didn't those experts of the primordial Dao court come for Lu Qinyan? Right now, Zhuang Yunji had been grounded, and Yu Xian was no threat. If nothing unexpected happened, they could take the opportunity to force Lu Qinyan to bow her head and submit. But at this critical moment, such a bloody incident had happened. This was too much of a coincidence. Send someone to the guest mountain to check if anyone has been in contact with Lu Qinyan and Yu Xian recently. Hua Dian made a decision. In addition, block the news and send people to appease the cultivators on the rocking boat. We can't let this panic spread. Everyone nodded. There was still about half a year before they arrived at the Hongmeng world. During this period, as long as the murderer could be caught, the adverse effects of this bloody incident could be resolved. Hua Dian. Suddenly, an angry shout sounded outside the hall. The elite forces around my young master have all died on this rocking boat. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? It was a man in a jade robe. His face was livid and his eyes were about to split open. His attitude was also extremely rude and unreasonable. He was not afraid of any of the big shots of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. He was just short of pointing at Hua Dian's nose and cursing. But even so, whether it was Hua Dian or the others present, they all seemed to swallow their anger. The reason was that this man in the jade robe was Kong Yu's personal retainer. His name was Kong Lin. Although he was not a descendant of the primordial Dao court, no one dared to slight him. More importantly, Kong Lin was a descendant of the Imperial Kong clan. The Imperial Kong clan was an ancient imperial clan like the Su clan and the Kuan clan. Its ancestor, the solitary sky demon saint, was the leader of the 7 primordial demon emperors. How could the Heavenly Sound Pavilion dare to offend such a figure? Young friend, please calm down. This matter happened too suddenly, and we can't lock onto the murderer for a while. But don't worry, as long as I, Hua Dian, am here, I will definitely find the murderer. Hua Dian stood up and promised in a sonorous voice. The others also nodded. But Kong Lin did not appreciate it. He still sneered fiercely. Is it enough to just catch the murderer? The elite forces around my young master are all dead. Let's see how the Heavenly Sound Pavilion will explain this matter. After saying that, he turned around and left. That rude and unreasonable attitude angered Hua Dian to the point his face darkened, and the others looked at each other in dismay. Whether it was the primordial Dao court or the Imperial Kong clan, they were all giants on the starry sky ancient path. The heavenly sound pavilion did not dare to offend them. As such, no matter how bad Kong Lin's attitude was, they could only pinch their noses and bear with it. What are you waiting for? Go and investigate! Huadian roared. At this moment, he could not control the emotions that had accumulated in his heart. He was furious like a lion, and his voice was like thunder shaking the hall. Listening string pavilion. Zhuang Yunji was in a good mood. She had already learned about the series of events that had happened tonight. When she first heard about it, she was shocked. But soon she realized that the impact of this bloody incident was very beneficial to her and her disciple Lu Qinyan. At least, before the murderer was caught, the heavenly sound pavilion would not be able to spare any energy to deal with them. Evil is doomed to destruction. This is retribution. Zhuang Yunji said slowly. On the opposite side, Xiao Yunkong and Ouyang Pei's faces were a little ugly. Their hearts were in turmoil. They realized that after this incident, it would have a serious impact on the heavenly sound pavilion. As for Zhuang Yunji's attitude, they were in no mood to pay attention to it. This is actually true. Lu Qinyan stood there in a daze. She was dressed in white and her figure was graceful. Her clear and beautiful face was filled with shock. Even so, she was still as beautiful as a painting, like a fairy descending to the world. After a while, Lu Qinyan tried to calm herself down and could not help but look into the distance. Chapter 1913. However, when he noticed Lu Qinyan's gaze, Lin Sun opened his eyes for meditation and said with a smile, "Do you believe me now?" Lu Qinyan nodded with a smile on her moist lips. "I still feel like I'm in a dream." Lin Sun was speechless and said, "There's always a way out. Miss Qinyan, now that the heavenly sound pavilion is in trouble, they must be busy with their own affairs. It will be very safe for you and your master." Lu Qinyan nodded, and the lingering depression that shrouded her eyebrows also reduced a lot. Her whole person glowed with an amazingly bright aura. She came to Lin Sun and sat down, tilted her head and asked, "Senior Yuxian, who do you think the murderer is?" Her voice was as clear and sweet as the sound of nature. Her eyes were as clear as stars, and her eyebrows were picturesque. It was a rare pleasure to hear her speak. Lin Sun picked up the green gourd, took a sip of wine, and joked, "How can I know? Maybe it's a senior who has tender feelings for women and can't bear to see Miss Qinyan being harmed. However, Miss Qinyan, you can't call him murderer. He is a living bodhisattva who saves people from suffering." Lu Qinyan glanced at Lin Sun with her clear eyes. She was so beautiful that it made people's hearts tremble. She thought for a moment and said, "Regardless of whether he is a living bodhisattva or not, I only know that Senior Yuxian brought back a great piece of news when he went out. If there's a chance in the future, I must repay Senior well. There's no need to wait. Let's do it now." Lin Sun suddenly remembered something and said, "I have long heard that Miss Qinyan has excellent attainments in music and can play a rare instrument called ancient rhythm ocarina. I wonder if I can have the honor to listen to it?" Lu Qinyan was surprised. "Ancient rhythm ocarina? Senior, who told you this? Since I entered the heavenly sound pavilion to cultivate, I have never shown this instrument again." Lin Sun felt bad in his heart. When he was about to explain, Lu Qinyan nodded with a smile. "However, if you like it, I don't mind showing it." As she said, she took out a water droplet-shaped instrument, about the size of a palm, with 9 holes on its surface and a gentle luster like green jade. Ancient rhythm ocarina. There was an imperceptible trance in the depth of Lin's eyes. At the age of 7, in the mine prison. It was a snowy night. Master Lu sat alone on the top of a mountain, holding a wine gourd, drinking alone in the wind and snow. When he was drunk, Master Lu took out the ancient rhythm ocarina he had been wearing and called Lin Sun, who was only 7 years old at that time. Without any conversation, Master Lu began to play the ancient rhythm ocarina. That voice was lonely and empty, and it drifted amidst the wind and snow in the heavens and the earth, and it revealed indescribable loneliness and sorrow. It was the first time for Lin Sun, who was only 7 years old, to know the feeling of loneliness in the melody. At the end of the song, Master Lu looked into Lin's eyes and said, "Remember this song. It's the last trace of your mother before she left." From then on, Lin Sun remembered the ancient rhythm ocarina and the tune. Lu Qingyan didn't notice Lin's strangeness. She pressed her white fingers on the ancient rhythm ocarina and opened her red lips slightly, playing it. A melodious rhythm like the sound of nature sounded, like wisps of wind swaying in the starry sky, echoing in the vast river of time. Lin Sun drank silently. His long-sealed memories seemed to be unlocked. He thought of Master Lu and the days when he was a child in the mine prison. In the quiet courtyard, the night sky was as dark as ink, and the starlight was fluttering. The melodious notes were like strings that plucked people's hearts, drifting in the air, killing people in the world of mortals. In another courtyard, a teenager in linen was lying lazily in a rocking chair. He rested his head on his arms, crossed his legs and hummed, "Well, no, it should be laughing a glass of wine and killing people in the downtown." The teenager in linen had also heard about the bloody things that happened on the rocking boat. His first reaction was to slap his thigh and sigh with emotion, "This guy is fierce." Wasn't it fierce to kill people from the primitive Taoist court? At that time, the teenager in linen impulsively wanted to find Lin Sun and have a good chat with this fierce man. It would be better if he could ask for a glass of wine. If Lin Sun didn't agree, he would threaten him with being an informant. After all, on the rocking boat today, he was probably the only one who knew who the murderer of this bloody thing was. But it was better that he was stopped by the old woman. She repeatedly told him not to get involved in this storm, and just to look on coldly. This disappointed the teenager in linen. At this moment, he was lying in the rocking chair, listening to the faint sound of rhythm coming from the distant courtyard. It was as beautiful as the sound of nature, and he became more and more depressed. After that guy killed people, he returned with a beautiful woman accompanying him and listening to wonderful music. He was so carefree. Looking at himself, he was not even allowed to leave the courtyard, which was really worrying. There was a knock on the door. With a whoosh, the teenager in linen immediately got up and rushed forward to open the door. He said, "Granny, I just want to see who is visiting. I promise I won't cause any trouble. Don't get involved." The old woman felt helpless. She also knew that this kid was extremely lively. After staying indoors for so many days, he was about to be bored. "Who is it?" The teenager in linen opened the door and greeted them with a smile. Outside the door stood a group of experts from the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, led by an elder in the Saint King realm named Qingwen. "Child, we have some questions that need your answer," Qingwen said with a gloomy face. "In addition, if you don't mind, we will also search your residence. Child, you should know that some very bad things happened tonight. I hope you can cooperate." His words were firm and carried a tone that could not be disobeyed. This made the smile on the teenager's face disappear. He said weakly, "Oh, I see. Sorry, it has nothing to do with me." Bang! He closed the door and muttered, "They actually suspected me. These idiots are really blind." The old woman in the distance said, "Young master, do you understand now? That guy is trouble. Anyone who comes into contact with him will suffer." The teenager in linen sighed, "It's just a chat." There was another knock on the door. The teenager in linen raised his eyebrows and opened the door. He saw Qingwen and the others looking at him with unfriendly expressions, clearly angry. "Yo, you don't want to give up." The teenager in linen crossed his arms and smiled mischievously. "All of you look so gloomy. Are you crying for your funeral? Child, please show some respect." Qingwen gritted his teeth and was so angry that he almost went berserk. Although this is Guest Mountain, it is also the territory of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. "I don't care where you come from. If you don't cooperate today, don't blame us for being rude." The old woman in the distance cursed inwardly. However, before she could stop him, the teenager in linen suddenly stretched out his hand. Crack! Ching-Wen, the Sage King Realm Elder of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, had his neck twisted like a fried dough twist. Then, his body seemed to have been incinerated, instantly turning into ashes that dissipated without a trace. From the beginning to the end, he did not even have time to react. Those who dared to threaten me are all dead now. You are no exception, the youth in linen clothes said with a chuckle. His eyes narrowed, and he looked harmless. However, when the experts who came with Ching-Wen faced the teenager again, their bodies stiffened as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Their faces were filled with fear. I attended the wedding banquet today and drank a little too much, but I didn't drop the ball. Chapter 1914. The experts of Heavenly Music Parlor were scared out of their wit. The youth in linen clothes suddenly felt dispirited and bored. He sighed, turned around, and walked into the courtyard, no longer paying attention to those cowards. They were indeed too cowardly, and he was not interested at all. Instead, it made him feel even more bored. He rubbed his chin and muttered to himself, "Ants? Hee, I finally understand why those big shots would sigh like that. It's indeed boring. Young master, all beings are ants in the face of the great Tao." The old woman reminded him lest the young man thought too highly of himself. The young man in linen clothes lay lazily on the rocking chair and chuckled. "That's right. In the eyes of Granny and my father, I'm just a nobody. I'm no different from an ant." Immediately after, he thought of something and pounded his chest, lamenting, "I suddenly realized that I've been made a scapegoat for that guy." The old woman rolled her eyes. "Brat, you only realized it now?" However, she changed her tone when she spoke. Her voice was calm and indifferent, like a god speaking softly. "Young master, I'm not someone to be trifled with." The cheeky young man's expression suddenly turned serious. "Granny, I'm not afraid of trouble. Please don't break your fast on eating meat." A gentle light appeared in the old woman's murky eyes as she nodded. Only then did the young man in linen clothes smile in a carefree manner, as though a huge burden had been lifted off his shoulders. However, he knew in his heart that although he was a little lawless, compared to his granny, he was a completely harmless and obedient child. If his granny were to go berserk, she would be able to pierce through the heavens. Outside the courtyard, the experts of Heavenly Music Parlor escaped death and left hurriedly with unconcealable fear. Elder Ching-Wen was a sage king, but he didn't even have time to react before he was killed by the linen-clothed young man. When those people returned and reported the news, the upper echelons of Heavenly Music Parlor were in an uproar. "What? Elder Ching-Wen was killed? How audacious! This is our Heavenly Music Parlor's support boat. Doesn't that damn thing know what respect is? He must be the murderer who killed the expert of the primordial Tao court." An angry voice resounded in the hall. The brows of the Supreme Elder Hua Dian knit together tightly while his expression was terrifyingly gloomy, and he suddenly shouted explosively, "Shut up!" His voice was like a thunderclap, and it caused everyone to go silent like cicadas in the winter. Hua Dian took a deep breath and said, "Tell me about that young man's identity and background." "Supreme Elder, it's recorded on the boarding account that the linen-clothed youth is called Little Nine, and there's an old woman by his side that acts as a retainer." An elder hurriedly said, "Little Nine?" Everyone instantly knew that this was a fake name. "Where did he come from?" Hua Dian asked. To be able to stay in the courtyard paradise of Welcoming Guest Mountain, one must not be an ordinary person. Cold sweat broke out on the elder's forehead as he said with a trembling voice, "That youth, Little Nine and the others spent 3 million myriad Tao crystals to stay in the Welcoming Guest Mountain." Everyone was astounded because this was a sky-high price that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to produce. Moreover, it was only used to rent a courtyard, which made people feel that it was a waste of money. At this time, Wu Yunlian suddenly said, he would rather spend 3 million myriad Tao crystals than expose his real identity. Moreover, He can kill a saint king with one move. This is very suspicious. Everyone's pupils shrank. Hua Dian suddenly stood up, his eyes bursting with killing intent, and said, "I'd like to see who this little nine is." In the quiet courtyard of welcoming Guest Mountain. After the song, Lin Sun's thoughts were pulled back from the trance with the lingering sound. He raised his eyes and saw that Lu Qingyan was also looking at him. Her clear eyes were brighter than the stars in the sky. "Senior, you seem to be thinking of something?" Lu Qingyan asked softly. She was best at the way of music, which was ever-changing and most suitable for the changes of mood and mood. She could even spy on all the secrets in the heart of the listener with a piece of music. But just now, she didn't do so, which was tantamount to offending him. Even so, she was still keenly aware that the emotional fluctuations of Yu Xian in front of her seemed to be a little too strong. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Can I have a look at this ancient rhythm ocarina?" Lu Qingyan handed it over with a smile. Lin Sun took it in his hand and pressed his 10 fingers naturally on the holes of the ancient rhythm ocarina, gently rubbing it. Lu Qingyan said, "Speaking of this instrument, it reminds me of a friend." Lin Sun was stunned. He looked up and saw that Lu Qingyan seemed to be lost in reminiscence, with a smile on her lips. She continued, "A long time ago, I traveled in a place far away from the starry sky ancient road. It was there that I accidentally came into contact with this unique instrument, ancient rhythm ocarina. I fell in love with it at first sight. But the ancient rhythm ocarina in my hand is seriously damaged, so I have been looking for someone who can help me repair the instrument. It was also by chance that I met that friend." When Lu Qingyan said this, the smile on her lips became stronger. "He also told me that the music in the world is inseparable from the 5 tones of gong, shang, jiao, zheng and yu. Only the ancient rhythm ocarina can play 9 different tones. In the end, it was he who helped me repair this instrument and made a breakthrough in my pursuit of music." Lin Sun listened silently. Of course, he was himself. When he was in Xiao Empire, he got to know Lu Qingyan, the world's #1 artistic practitioner, because of the ancient rhythm ocarina. Lu Qingyan's eyes became bright when she said this. "Later, we became friends. He was an extremely bold person, always doing unexpected things and doing many great things that shook the world." Immediately, Lu Qingyan's eyes were filled with sadness, but later, when I left Xiao Empire, I haven't seen him since. "Do you miss this friend very much?" Lin Sun asked. Lu Qingyan shook her head and sighed faintly. "About 6 years ago, I finally heard some news about him, but it was not good news. Now I don't want to see him on the ancient starry sky path." Lin Sun couldn't help asking, "Why?" Lu Qingyan raised a pair of clear eyes and stared at Lin Sun, because although the ancient starry sky path is vast, it can no longer accommodate him. Lin Sun was shocked. He was finally sure that Lu Qingyan should also have heard what happened in Kunlun ruins 6 years ago and knew that he was now wanted all over the world. "Senior, the starry sky can't accommodate him alone. If he appears, won't it be very dangerous?" Lu Qingyan's voice was low, "So, I would rather not see him again than let him appear on this ancient starry sky path." Lin Sun was touched and a myriad of emotions surged in his heart. It turned out that there were still people in this world who were worried about his safety when he didn't know it. How lucky it is to have a friend like Miss Qingyan care about him so much, Lin Sun said with a smile. Lu Qingyan smiled and said, "Friends should be like this. What do you think, senior?" Lin Sun deeply agreed. At this moment, he frowned and stood up, saying, "Something seems to have happened outside. Miss Qingyan, stay here and don't move. I'll go and have a look." With that, he walked out of the courtyard. "Is it him?" Looking at his back gradually disappearing, Lu Qingyan was stunned and silent. From the first time they met, this senior Yu Xian gave her a sense of déjà vu. But she was confused and couldn't be sure. When Lin Sun walked out of the courtyard, he saw at a glance that the mountain path was brightly lit. A group of big shots of heavenly sound pavilion gathered together and blocked the door of a courtyard. The strong people living in every courtyard of Guest Mountain were all alarmed like Lin Sun and were paying attention to all this. Why did they go to find that guy? Lin Sun was stunned and recognized that the blocked courtyard was the place where the young man in linen lived. Lin Sun showed a strange expression and stood there, waiting to see what would happen. The door to the courtyard opened, and the youth in linen clothes walked out lazily. He said weakly, "I knew it. This black pot has been put on my head. Damn it, I shouldn't have been so cheap just now. Aren't I just looking for trouble for myself?" Outside the courtyard, the atmosphere was solemn. The group of big shots of Heavenly Sound Pavilion was led here by Huadian, the Supreme Elder. There were peerless Saint Kings and Saint Kings, a large group of them. Coupled with Huadian, the existence of the Quasi-Emperor realm, standing there together, the horrible aura they exuded was enough to make the world tremble. Just like at this moment, countless strong people on the boat were paying attention to this place with their divine thoughts. Everyone seemed extremely careful and felt depressed. After all, this lineup was really too strong. However, the young man in linen clothes was alone. Not only did he swagger out of the courtyard, but he also ignored Huadian and the others. This caused many people to be extremely shocked. Who was this young man? Where did he get his confidence from? "Did you kill Chengwen?" Huadian said indifferently with a gloomy expression. He resisted the killing intent in his heart and did not attack immediately. The young man was too calm and his origin was extremely mysterious. Ordinary people would never have the courage to kill the successor of the primitive Taoist court. And he did not kill one, but a group of them. "You mean the old trash who threatened me just now?" the young man in linen asked with a smile. His words made everyone present furious. How should they answer this question? If they said yes, it was like admitting that Chengwen was an old trash, but they could not say no. "Little thing, you are still sharp-tongued when you are about to die. Believe it or not, I will capture you now, pull out your tendons and skin you alive." A peerless Saint King Realm Elder scolded with great power. The youth in linen sneered and squinted his eyes. He pointed at his own nose and said provocatively, "Didn't you say you would pull out your tendons and peel off your skin? If you can't do it, I will beat you to death." Chapter 19:15. The young man's provocation enraged the Saint King who spoke. He was about to attack but was stopped by Huadian. Huadian's voice was cold. "Young man, let me ask you again. Did you kill those people from the primitive Dao court?" The young man was about to speak when a terrifying pressure came from Huadian, making his body stiffen as if he was under the pressure of 100,000 mountains. At the same time, Huadian said indifferently, "Remember, you only have one chance. If you talk nonsense again, your life will be in danger." In the courtyard, the old woman appeared silently. The young man's forehead was full of blue veins. His frivolous expression was replaced by a rare sense of calmness and sharpness. In the depths of his eyes, there was a hint of madness. But in the end, he took a deep breath and suppressed his killing intent. He shouted, "Brother, do you really have the heart to see me take the blame? They are going to kill me." All the people in Huadian cast their eyes to the distance and saw Lin Sun standing in front of a courtyard. "Yu Xian." Someone recognized Lin Sun and was displeased. How could this trash be the murderer of the primitive Dao court? The others also sneered and looked away. Yu Xian was a Saint King of the Yu clan. They had already figured out his background and did not believe he had the ability to do such a thing. "Little thing, you dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? It's not good to bite people. We all know what Yu Xian is capable of. Don't you think it's ridiculous to say such stupid words?" They looked at the young man in linen with even more unkind eyes. Lin Sun frowned. Of course, he was unhappy to be called trash. But when he saw the young man's expression, he could not help but feel happy. The hemp-clothed youth looked as if he had eaten a dead fly. He held his forehead with his hand and said painfully, I'm so unlucky. Not only did I become a scapegoat for others, but I also encountered a group of blind fools who came to question me. Granny, I don't want to live anymore. Hua Dian's face was gloomy. This kid was still acting like a rascal. Did he really not know how to write the word death? Just as he was about to do something, his pupils suddenly constricted, and his entire body trembled. His expression changed drastically as he looked at the courtyard behind the hemp-robed youth. In the courtyard, the old woman had a kind expression on her face. She slowly walked over. Young master, it's better to live than to die. Your life is much more precious than theirs. His voice was filled with incomparable affection. Many people frowned, only then did they notice the old woman's existence. A saint king couldn't help but say angrily, "Old woman, you, bang." Halfway through his sentence, the man's body suddenly exploded. His flesh and blood fell to the ground, and a thick stench of blood filled the air. The great figures of the heavenly music parlor were shocked, and their expressions changed. Only now did they realize that this unremarkable and senile old woman was actually a terrifying existence that had concealed herself deeply. Even Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. That old woman was not simple. Only the youth in hemp garments had a look of despair on his face. He sighed and said, "Didn't you say you wouldn't break the vegetarian diet?" The old woman had a kind look in her eyes. "It's just an ant. It can't be considered as breaking an oath." The hemp-clothed youth laughed heartily, looking down on everyone. Hua Dian of the heavenly music parlor greets Senior. At this moment, Hua Dian, who had a gloomy and murderous look on his face, suddenly bowed deeply and said respectfully, "If I have offended you in any way, please forgive me." The back of Hua Dian's shirt was soaked in cold sweat. Everyone was stunned, then shocked, and fell silent. Hua Dian was an old monster in the Boundary Emperor realm, but at this moment, he was respectfully addressing the other party as senior and bowing his head to beg for forgiveness. This was like a bolt of lightning, and the people of the heavenly music parlor who had come to denounce her were all stunned. Could this old woman be a Boundary Emperor? Everyone's scalps went numb at the thought of this. The old woman walked over and stood behind the youth in hemp garments. She ignored Hua Dian, who had been bowing his head, and asked the youth in hemp garments kindly, "Young master, what do you think we should do? If you feel wronged, then kill them all." Everyone was even more shocked, and their faces were filled with shock. If the old woman was so terrifying, then wouldn't the background of this young master beside her be even more terrifying? Senior. At this moment, Hua Dian fell to his knees. "We have eyes but failed to see. Please be magnanimous and forgive us this time." A quasi-emperor had disregarded his dignity and knelt in front of everyone. All the experts who were secretly watching this scene could not help but gasp. Hua Dian was the supreme elder of the heavenly music parlor, a respected quasi-emperor, but he had knelt down and begged for forgiveness. There was no need to mention just how shocking this scene was. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. He could vaguely guess what kind of existence the old woman was. There was a silence. The old woman still ignored the kneeling Hua Dian and only looked at the youth in hemp garments. The youth in hemp garments looked uncertain. After having the support of the old woman, he had changed his arrogance and domineering attitude, as if he had encountered a huge problem. After a long time, he sighed, "Granny, didn't you say that I am not allowed to cause trouble on this trip?" The old woman said seriously, "We won't cause trouble, but it doesn't mean that we are afraid of trouble. Moreover, this time, young master, you have only suffered an undeserved calamity." The youth in hemp garments took a deep breath and said, "Before this trip, my father said that my temperament is like an ape and a horse, and that I can only go home when I subdue my heart. But now it seems that the path of subduing one's heart is not so easy." He laughed self-deprecatingly. "If it was in the past, I would have killed them long ago, but now, for the sake of subduing one's heart, I feel uncomfortable all over." A trace of pity appeared in the old woman's eyes, and she said, This is just the beginning, there's no need to be anxious. The youth in hemp garments nodded. At this moment, Hua Dian and the others were like prisoners waiting to be judged. All of them were terrified and uneasy, and their hearts were filled with great terror. The youth in hemp garments suddenly kicked Hua Dian, causing the supreme elder of Quasi-Emperor realm to fall back and roll on the ground. He was in an extremely sorry state. He did not dare to resist at all, and even took the initiative to withdraw the defensive energy on his body, for fear that he would injure the youth in hemp garments. When the youth in hemp garments saw this, he felt an inexplicable sense of disgust, and he pointed at Hua Dian and scolded, "You are a dignified quasi-emperor, but you have no skin, no face, and no strength of character. No wonder you haven't become an emperor at your age. Trash like you can forget about becoming an emperor in this lifetime." He seemed to still be unable to vent his anger, so he charged forward and fiercely kicked Hua Dian a few more times. One of his kicks even landed on Hua Dian's face, causing his face to turn red and swollen. However, he still lowered his head and smiled along with Hua Dian. "Old trash!" The youth in hemp garments scolded fiercely, but for some reason, he felt a sense of melancholy in his heart. A quasi-emperor, in order to drag out an ignoble existence, would he throw away his dignity and character? Get lost. He waved his hand. Hua Dian looked as if he had been saved, and he kowtowed gratefully, but his eyes were fixed on the old woman. The old woman said, "What, do you still want to stay and be a kowtowing bug?" Only then did Hua Dian get up in a panic, and he hurriedly left with the people of the Heavenly Music Pavilion. He did not want to stay in this place for the rest of his life. Wait. The voice of the youth in hemp garments rang out, causing Hua Dian's body to stiffen and his heart to skip a beat. Was this young master going to go back on his word? The youth in hemp garments said calmly, "Where's the skin and tendons pulled out?" His words were like a bolt of lightning, causing the soul of the absolute Saint King beside Hua Dian to almost jump out of his body, and he fell to his knees, begging for mercy. The old woman grabbed across the air, and in an instant, the absolute Saint King's skin was ripped off, and his tendons were pulled out inch by inch. His entire body contorted in pain and fear, and he let out an incomparably shrill scream of pain. But from beginning to end, he was powerless to struggle. That bloody and cruel scene caused Hua Dian and the others to turn pale, and their mouths to tremble, but no one dared to step forward to plead for mercy. In the end, although the absolute Saint King survived, his vitality was greatly damaged, and he was taken away by Hua Dian and the others in a hurry. The old woman let out a light snort, and then, the strong men who were secretly watching all this felt as if their souls had been hammered, and they almost coughed up blood. They didn't dare to look in that direction again. After doing all this, the old woman glanced at Lin Sun in the distance with calm eyes. But Lin Sun's body was tense at this moment, like a tiny ant being stared at by a god. Although it was only for a moment, the old woman withdrew her gaze, but Lin Sun knew it was a silent warning. At this time, the youth in hemp garments suddenly jumped onto the wall and said fiercely, "Bro, I've taken the blame for you once. This is a great favor, and you must repay me in the future." Lin Sun smiled slightly. "Although I want to thank you very much, I've never asked you to take the blame after all. This favor, I don't owe you." "You?" The youth in hemp garments glared angrily. "Granny, I think we should let this guy taste the feeling of pulling out his tendons and peeling off his skin?" The old woman smiled and said, "Sure." The youth in hemp garments was startled, and he hurriedly said, forget it, let's not stoop to his level." Lin Sun smiled, turned around and walked into the courtyard. Watching him leave, the youth in hemp garments said calmly, "Granny, I was wondering how much the strength of character and dignity in this world are worth. Now I find that I was wrong. At least that guy is different. He has a bit of strength of character and dignity." The old woman looked kind and listened quietly. Good, no wonder I felt that this guy was different from others at the first sight. The youth in hemp garments showed a bright smile. The old woman still listened with a smile. She didn't tell the youth beside her that the guy might have strength of character and dignity, but he also had confidence that was different from others. From the beginning to the end, the man didn't have a trace of fear at all, and he was as calm as a rock. This could only prove that the man was not afraid of her, the old woman. Thinking about it, how could the person who dared to kill the primitive Taoist court be an ordinary person? In comparison, although the young master was born with innate intelligence and talent that was unparalleled throughout the ages, in the end, he was still lacking in the tempering of worldly affairs. Chapter 1916. After that night, the news of the heavenly music parlor's supreme elder Hua Dian kneeling down and begging for mercy spread like wildfire on the boat. How powerful was a quasi-emperor! On the entire starry sky ancient path, he could be considered a powerhouse. Furthermore, Hua Dian's identity was not ordinary. He was the supreme elder of the Purple Hing Galaxy's #1 orthodoxy, and his name had been known throughout the Purple Hing Galaxy for a long time. But now, on his own sex boat, he had knelt down. This matter was undoubtedly too humiliating and dealt a heavy blow to the reputation of the heavenly music parlor. First, a group of primitive Tao court experts were killed. Then, this quasi-emperor Hua Dian had no choice but to kneel down and beg for mercy in order to live. The heavenly music parlor has lost a lot of face. Many people sighed to themselves. There was no lack of gloating people watching the heavenly music parlor's show. To be able to make a quasi-emperor kneel down and beg for mercy, that young man's identity is not simple. More people were shocked and began to pay attention to the youth, trying to guess his identity. But no one could say for sure. All they knew was that he was riding the boat under the name Little Nine. The most terrifying thing is the old lady beside him. She is most likely an emperor-level being. Of course, the one who received the most attention was undoubtedly the old lady beside the youth. After all, even a noble quasi-emperor like Hua Dian could only prostrate himself before her. Impossible. If an emperor-level being was here, he could travel the universe and travel between worlds. How could he be like us, traveling by boat? Someone else retorted. Everyone knew that emperor-level beings were like supreme overlords on the starry sky ancient path. They could cover the sky with one hand and were omnipotent. If a quasi-emperor was already an unreachable existence in the eyes of the world, then an emperor-level being was simply a legend that could illuminate the heavens and deter the stars. Why would such an existence need to travel by boat? Furthermore, have any of you ever heard of an emperor-level being a servant to a young man? Someone else came up with a more convincing deduction that won the approval of many. Which emperor-level being was not a legendary figure? Who in this world was qualified to make them willing to be servants? However, no matter how they guessed and deduced, no one was able to determine the origins of the young man and the old woman. For a time, this pair of master and servant seemed to be even more mysterious in the eyes of all the experts on the boat. As for the Yu Xian, played by Lin Sun, no one cared about him from beginning to end. He didn't even have a sense of existence. In this regard, Lin Sun was happy to see it happen and hoped that no one would pay attention to it. Being low-key was the way to be low-key. To the experts of the heavenly music parlor, this day and night was a nightmare. First, a group of experts from the primordial Tao court were brutally murdered, causing great panic on the rocking ship. Following that, a pair of terrifying master and servant, the hemp-clothed youth and the old woman appeared. Even the supreme elder Hua Dian had no choice but to kneel and beg for mercy. This series of blows almost drove all the experts in the heavenly music parlor to the brink of collapse. This boat belonged to the heavenly music pavilion. But now they were the ones who suffered the greatest blow and impact. It was said that after the supreme elder Hua Dian returned, he immediately went into closed-door cultivation. As for when he would come out, no one knew. The experts of the heavenly music pavilion were all distressed. They knew that Hua Dian had suffered such a great blow that he was too ashamed to show his face again. What should we do? For a time, everyone in the Heavenly Music Pavilion was in a state of panic. In the end, it was another Supreme Elder of the Heavenly Music Pavilion, Liang Chuan, who stepped forward to stabilize the situation. Liang Chuan, an expert in the quasi-emperor realm, had hair as white as snow and a youthful appearance. In terms of foundation and cultivation, he was even slightly stronger than Hua Dian. The boat heading to the primordial world was guarded by Liang Chuan and Hua Dian, two experts in the quasi-emperor realm. In a large hall, Liang Chuan gathered the senior members of the Heavenly Music Pavilion and issued 3 orders. From today onwards, no one is allowed to provoke the master and servant. They are not to be seen as murderers who killed the experts of the primordial Tao court. I will not interfere in the matter of dealing with Lu Qingyan, but before we reach the primordial world, there must be no more infighting. Everyone silently accepted the first 2 orders. They did not refute, nor did they have the courage to refute. But when she heard the last order, Wu Yunlian jumped out and couldn't help saying, "Supreme Elder, Lu Qingyan is the person that young Master Kong Yu of the Primordial Tao Court took a fancy to. The death of the Primordial Tao Court experts on our boat must have something to do with her. Are we just going to let it go?" "Yes." Some others also nodded. Liang Chuan frowned and said, I don't care about Lu Qingyan's matter, but if anyone dares to fight among themselves, don't blame me for being rude." With that, he flicked his sleeves and left. He was wholeheartedly devoted to cultivation and extremely hated this kind of infighting. If it weren't for the fact that Hua Dian had suffered such a great blow this time, he wouldn't have cared about these things at all. Watching Liang Chuan leave, everyone looked at each other. "Senior Sister Wu, what does Supreme Elder Liang Chuan mean?" Someone couldn't help asking. Wu Yunlian took a deep breath and said coldly, "No infighting means that he won't watch us deal with Lu Qingyan. But it doesn't matter. As long as this bitch is on the boat, she is destined to be unable to escape when we arrive at the Hong Meng world." Speaking of this, Wu Yunlian remembered something and said coldly, "By the way, after a period of time, the boat will enter the White Emperor Star area. We will dock there for 3 days. During these 3 days we must keep an eye on Lu Qingyan. We must not let her take the opportunity to abscond." Many people nodded in agreement. All the strongmen of the primordial Tao court were dead. If Lu Qingyan was allowed to escape, how could the Heavenly Sound School explain to Kong Yu? As time went by, the atmosphere on the boat gradually calmed down. This made many people breathe a sigh of relief. At least it proved that the murderer who killed the primordial Tao court experts had no intention of continuing to commit murder on the boat. Similarly, the life of Lin Sun and Lu Qingyan also returned to peace. Although Lu Qingyan still had something on her mind, she was obviously much more clear-minded than before. Occasionally, she would personally make tea for Lin Sun to drink. Lin Sun devoted himself to cultivation. Not only did the cultivation of the 9 cauldrons world suppression scripture advance rapidly, but the tempering of the 5 viscera also made amazing changes. In his 5 viscera there were 5 divine lights, green, red, black, yellow, and white, condensing into embryonic halos. Every breath produced a wonderful rhythm like life. This was the 5 viscera divine fetus. The great way of the Golden Court scripture was divided into 4 realms, namely, the 5 accumulation realm, the 5 color realm, the 5 taste realm, and the 5 virtues realm. In the past, as Lin Sun condensed the 5 viscera divine fetus, his comprehension of the great way of the Golden Court scripture had already broken through to the 5 color realm. In this realm, the 5 true spirits in the 5 viscera would become corporeal and display their own appearances. For example, the verdant wood true spirit had the appearance of everlasting vitality and evergreen. Until reaching the 5 taste realm, the 5 spirits would break out of the shell in the 5 viscera divine fetus and have their own taste, just like each person exuding different charm. The 5 virtues realm would enable the 5 doppelgangers to have their own spiritual awareness and Taoism. At this time, Lin Sun's tempering of the 5 viscera divine fetus was on the verge of breaking through the 5 taste realm. In particular, the greenwood spirit in the liver produced an extremely strong rhythm, as if it was alive, as if life would be born at any time. If I'm able to cultivate the greenwood true spirit, then it'll be equivalent to possessing a greenwood Tao body clone. At that time, I'll be able to fuse my cultivation into it, and even an Emperor Realm expert would probably be unable to discern my true identity. After a day of cultivation, Lin Sun fell into meditation. He had a faint feeling that the hemp-clothed youth, little 9, and the old woman had long seen through that this Yu Xian was a disguise. This made Lin Sun a little vigilant. There were bound to be many Emperor Realm cultivators in the Hongmeng world. Once they noticed his existence, they could easily see through his disguise. But if he could cultivate the 5 viscera divine fetus, it would be completely different. Even if someone saw through his disguise as Yu Xian, they would never be able to guess his true identity. The only trouble Lin Sun felt was that the boy in linen often sat on the wall and chatted with him with a smile. He was like a chatterbox. However, after Lin Sun activated the forbidden formation in the courtyard to isolate the outside world, this trouble was solved. At that time, the boy in linen looked resentful like an abandoned widow and clamored to smash Lin Sun's door. But in the end, he didn't go out of the courtyard. At most, he just stood on the wall and looked into the distance. On this day, the support ship sailed into the White Emperor star field and stopped in the sky above a great world called Golden Sky. Some passengers hurriedly got off the boat and began to trade with the forces of the Golden Sky world for cultivation materials and treasures from all over the world. There were also some passengers who went to the Golden Sky world in groups for sightseeing. Reading 10,000 books was like walking 10,000 miles. For practitioners, traveling in the starry world was also a rare and precious cultivation. All kinds of things encountered along the way could be regarded as a kind of sharpening. The Golden Sky world was the largest world in the White Emperor star area, where the Jintian clan, a primitive emperor clan, lived. Similarly, the Jintian clan was also the largest force in the White Emperor star area. Its ancestor was the White Emperor, one of the famous 5 emperors in primitive times. A big world was named Golden Sky. This star region was crowned by the name of White Emperor. It wasn't hard to imagine just how powerful the Jintian clan was. In fact, in the whole starry ancient way, the Jintian clan was also a giant existence, not inferior to the Kuan clan, Su clan, Kong clan and other primitive emperor clans. On this day, Lin Sun also planned to travel to the Golden Sky world with Lu Qingyan. But as soon as he walked out of the gate of the courtyard, he was stopped by a group of people. P.S. Goldfish got married on July 1st of the Gregorian calendar, so there was only 1 month left. It was estimated that she would have no time to write during the half-month of marriage. At that time, if Goldfish asked for leave for half a month, everyone would be very unhappy. Chapter 1917. There was a famous White Emperor city in the Golden Heaven world, which was listed as one of the 6 ancient cities of the Starry Sky Ancient Path. White Emperor City was built on top of the clouds. It was built with a kind of icy soul snowstone that only existed in the primordial age. The stone was snow-white and smooth, and it was shrouded in mist. It was able to present the spectacle of icy clouds and flying snow. This city stood towering above the clouds in the sky and bathed in the radiance of the morning stars. It had experienced the vicissitudes of time and had survived until now. It was extremely grand and ancient. In the eyes of ordinary people in the Golden Heaven world, White Emperor City could be called a holy city, a place where only immortals could go. On the other hand, in the eyes of cultivators, White Emperor City was like a place of pilgrimage. It was the most prosperous city of cultivators in the world. It was a gathering of rare treasures from all over the world. Lin Sun and Lu Qinyan planned to go to the city to have a look and see this famous ancient city. Unexpectedly, as soon as they opened the gate of the courtyard, they saw a group of strong practitioners of Heavenly Sound Pavilion blocking the way. The leader was an elder at the peak of the Saint King realm named Yu Jun. There were also 3 Saint Kings and a group of disciples at the peak of the Great Saint realm. Among them was Zhan Bing, who once regarded Lin Sun as a coward. He had come to provoke Lin Sun, but Lin Sun was not fooled and ignored him. Junior Sister Qinyan, we have received orders that you are not allowed to go to the Golden Heaven world without permission. You have to stay in the courtyard for 3 days. It was Zhan Bing who spoke. He directly ignored Lin Sun with a fake smile. Even I am not allowed to go out? Whose order is this? Lu Qinyan frowned, and a trace of sullenness appeared on her face. Why are you asking so many questions? All you need to know is that because of you, Senior Uncle Yu Jun and everyone else can only stay here and keep an eye on you. Do you think we don't want to go to the Golden Sky world? Zhan Bing said impatiently. Lu Qinyan glanced at Yu Jun and others. Seeing their indifferent expressions, she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. These were her fellow disciples and elders. Well, you'd better be sensible and stay in the courtyard with Junior Sister Qinyan. Otherwise, don't blame Heavenly Sound Pavilion for not considering the old friendship of you family. Zhan Bing glanced at Lin Sun disdainfully and issued a warning. But Lin Sun suddenly slapped Zhan Bing in the face, causing the latter to stagger and fall to the ground with a thump. He let out a blood-curdling scream as blood spurted from his mouth and nose. His entire face was red and swollen. Everyone was stunned. It was beyond their expectation that Lin Sun, who was regarded as insignificant by them, dared to take action. In particular, Yu Jun's expression darkened. A Saint King actually dared to bully the successor of his own sect right in front of him. This was a complete provocation. Lu Qingyan's eyes widened in surprise. In her impression, this senior Yu Xian had always been patient and low-key. Why would he suddenly flip out? At this moment, Lin Sun said coldly, "Trash? How can a junior like you wantonly humiliate a member of my imperial clan's Yu clan? Kill me if you dare. I'd like to see how your heavenly music pavilion will give my Yu clan an explanation." These words made Yu Jun, who was about to capture Lin Sun, stagnate, and his face was cloudy and uncertain. If they really fell out, Yu Jun was not afraid. The only thing he was worried about was that Liang Chuan, the Supreme Elder, had just said a few days ago that internal strife was not allowed. If they attacked Yu Xian, Liang Chuan would definitely believe that they were targeting Lu Qinyan, which was an internal strife. "How dare you hit me?" Zhan Bing got up, his face full of anger and disbelief. But Lin Sun slapped him again. The slap was crisp. Zhan Bing let out a scream, fell to the ground, and fainted. Zhan Bing was a peerless great saint, but he was slapped unconscious. It could be imagined how strong Lin Sun was. "You're courting death." Yu Jun was completely furious. Although the slap was on Zhan Bing's face, it also made him feel humiliated, as if he had been provoked. But when he was about to take action, he suddenly noticed that Elder Liang Chuan had appeared not far away, with a touch of coldness and disgust on his youthful face. "Don't I mean what I said?" Liang Chuan said indifferently. Yu Jun's body was stiff, and he explained, "Uncle, you probably saw that Yu Xian hurt Zhan Bing. How could I sit back and watch? I just asked, do I mean what I said?" Liang Chuan's disgust became more and more intense. He was obsessed with cultivation, and what he hated most was to deal with such trivial and dirty things. Yu Jun's face changed for a while, and then he bowed his head and said, "Uncle, you're right. Humph. If it happens again, don't blame me for being rude." Liang Chuan turned around and left. From beginning to end, he ignored Lu Qinyan and Lin Sun. This also proved that he'd merely come here to defend the orders and will that he'd given, and not to uphold justice for the two of them. Lin Sun had been watching coldly, and he had a panoramic view of Liang Chuan's attitude. Forget it. Taking a deep breath, Yu Jun let out a long sigh and said, "Just now, Marshal Uncle Liang Chuan was right. Qing Yan, if you and Yu Xian want to go to the Golden Heaven Great World, you can go ahead." After that, he turned away with the crowd and the unconscious Zhan Bing. "This support boat is already equivalent to a cage for you, and it's an opportunity to spread your wings and fly high before you. Do you want to leave?" Lin Sun looked at Lu Qingyan. If Lu Qingyan was determined to leave, he would definitely help her. Unexpectedly, Lu Qingyan shook her head and turned into the courtyard. "Senior, if we really go to the Golden Heaven World, do you believe that they will definitely capture me as soon as possible? And you? I'm afraid you will be killed by them." Lin Sun smiled and said no more. At the foot of the guest mountain. After waiting for a long time, Lin Sun and Lu Qingyan didn't show up, which made Yu Jun frown and his face became gloomy. That little bitch didn't fall for it. As Lu Qingyan had speculated, it was impossible for Yu Jun to be so kind as to watch them leave the boat. The only purpose of this was to take the opportunity to kill Lin Sun and capture Lu Qingyan in the Golden Heaven World. "Uncle, are you going to let it go?" Zhan Bing had woken up, but his face was red and swollen like a pig's head. "What else can you do? Do you want to try the means of Grand Elder Liang Chuan?" With that, Yu Jun turned around and left. Zhan Bing panicked and hurriedly chased after him. Without Yu Jun, he had no confidence to challenge Yu Xian, the king of sages. These idiots are lucky. If that guy really goes to the Golden Heaven World, these idiots won't even know how they die. The teenager in linen, who had been lying on the wall and watching the scene, muttered to himself. After that, he let out a long sigh. What a pity! White Emperor City, the place where White Emperor proved his Tao. It's said that there are 36 pictures of White Emperor's Tao-cutting sword on the city wall, which contain the supreme mystery of swordsmanship. I don't know whether it's true or not. The old woman stood in the courtyard and looked at the teenager with a smile. She also thought of White Emperor City. However, she didn't think the same as the teenager. The primordial White Monarch was indeed an incredible figure. But for countless years, the Jintian clan had never produced a figure that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the primordial White Monarch. Especially among the young people of the Jintian clan, only a few of them could be regarded as great talents. As for White Emperor City, it had been a long time since there was a city lord who could be respected by the world like White Emperor. Of course, this was the old woman's opinion. In the White Emperor Star area and even in the entire Starry Sky ancient path, the Jintian clan was still a giant that couldn't be underestimated. Lin Sun also felt a little regretful that he couldn't go to White Emperor City. The primeval age could be said to be the golden age of cultivation. At that time, many Emperor Realm existences that could shake the ages were born. White Emperor was one of them. White Emperor City was regarded as one of the 6 ancient cities in the Starry Sky, and it was built by White Emperor himself. How extraordinary was that place! 3 days later, the cultivators who went to the Golden Sky World, whether they were here for trade or for sightseeing, all returned. At the same time, there was another group of guests on the support boat. They were going to take the boat to the Hongmeng World. When the support boat left the Golden Sky World and sailed into the Starry Sky, there was news. Some of the top figures of the younger generation of the Jintian clan also appeared on the support boat. They were going to the Hongmeng World. For a moment, all the cultivators on the support boat were shocked. The Jintian clan was the descendant of the White Emperor. It was said that in order to receive the distinguished guests from the Jintian clan, the Heavenly Music Parlor had specially vacated a group of courtyards on the guest mountain. It was said that among the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, there was a peerless beauty named Jintian Xianyue. She had cultivated for 180 years and had already stepped into the Saint King stage. She was ranked 49th on the All Heavens King Sage board. She was graceful, with fairy-like skin and jade-like bones. She was like a proud daughter of heaven. It was said that the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan were going to the Hongmeng world to participate in a Dao discussion event jointly organized by the 6 Dao courts. It was said that all kinds of news about the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan emerged like mushrooms after the rain that night, causing countless discussions and exclamations. In addition to the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, there were other cultivators who boarded the ship this time. However, compared to the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, they did not attract much attention. Only Lin Sun found something unusual. Amongst those cultivators was a group of monks who wore bamboo hats, coarse linen clothes, and walked barefooted. The aura of these monks made Lin Sun vaguely smell something unusual. It was the aura of the descendants of the Hidden Land Realm, one of the 3 dark magnates. Even if they did not wear black monk robes, even if they claimed to be from a Buddhist orthodoxy called the Jade Zen Temple, they still could not hide it from Lin Sun. He was too familiar with the aura of the descendants of the Hidden Land Realm. He, who had cultivated the Tranquility Scripture, could clearly capture this unique aura. Could it be that these bald donkeys of the Hidden Land Realm have already noticed my traces? Chapter 1918. These monks, who called themselves Jade Zen Temple, were arranged to live in a courtyard at the foot of the guest mountain. Usually, they were rarely seen going out, which made them low-key and mysterious. On the contrary, the disciples from the Jintian family were very active. They often went out together and played in the busy market. However, no one was able to see the beautiful and famous golden sky mystic moon. It was said that as soon as she boarded the ship, she practiced hard in the courtyard alone. An old servant guarded in front of the courtyard to prevent anyone from approaching. Clatter in the courtyard where Lin Sun and Lu Qinyan lived. The star's Tao restriction ran instantly with a burst of restriction power, isolating the outside world. In the courtyard, Lin Sun, who was sitting cross-legged, took a deep breath, and his body was covered with bright and blazing green light. Dong, dong, dong. Within the divine palace of his liver, the greenwood divine fetus produced a vibration that sounded like the beating of a divine drum. The vitality that was so dense that it seemed material erupted like a volcano, and there were faintly strands of the sound of the Tao surging as if ancient sages were reading scriptures. This situation lasted for 4 hours. Later, with a sound like the beginning of chaos, a handful of green light rain suddenly rushed out of the spiritual platform above Lin Sun's head. The light rain was flowing and the vitality was boiling. It gathered together and condensed into a green figure, which seemed to be made of the purest green glazed jade in the world, crystal clear and floating with Tao light. When the brilliance faded, a Dharmakaya floated to the ground. He was dressed in a green robe, with black hair fluttering. His facial features were clear and elegant, and his figure was tall and dignified, exuding a transcendent spirit. Looking carefully, this Dharmakaya looked exactly the same as Lin Sun, but its spirit showed a pure and vigorous spirit of greenwood. Greenwood Taoist body. A doppelganger of Tao bred by the divine fetus of greenwood. Lin Sun raised his head and looked at greenwood Taoist body. When their eyes met, Lin Sun had a feeling of blood and water blending together. It was as if the Taoist body was a part of his body. As long as he thought about it, he could make the Taoist body work for him. This was the realm of 5 flavors in the Yellow Court scripture. The 5 divine fetus bred in the 5 internal organs would break out of the shell and have their own flavors. The 5 hidden realms contained vitality. The 5-color realm possessed the appearance. For example, the greenwood divine embryo would display the appearance of everlasting green and everlasting vitality. The 5 flavors realm allowed the greenwood Taoist body to have the charm of the great Tao. If one cultivated to the 5 virtues realm, the 5 clones would have their own divine sense and cultivation. At present, Lin Sun had just broken through the 5 taste realm and condensed the first doppelganger, greenwood Taoist body. It was just a Taoist body without his own spiritual awareness and cultivation. Even so, it was enough for Lin Sun. With a single thought, Yi Futian's body trembled. Rumble. His primordial spirit, essence, qi, spirit, and Tao all surged out and fused into the body of the greenwood sect. As for his original body, it appeared to be in a sleeping state. What a powerful greenwood power! In an instant, Lin Sun felt all kinds of mysteries of the greenwood Taoist body, and many insights emerged in his mind. Wood was one of the 5 elements, and it controlled the vitality of heaven and earth. It was extremely miraculous. In the Great Way Yellow Court scripture, Senior Brother Guyupu had specially explained that once the greenwood Taoist body was formed, the body would be like the sky, and the power of life and death could be controlled. Lin Sun silently comprehended for a long time, and suddenly snapped his fingers. Around his feet, clear lotuses suddenly emerged, full of vitality and swaying. The stems and veins of the leaves were surrounded by wonderful Taoist patterns. The abundant and rich aura of green would spread in an instant. With a thought in Lin Sun's mind, thousands of clear lotuses instantly turned into withered lotus leaves, and their vitality was lost, as if they were robbed by a strong force. Soon, they all turned into ashes and scattered in the air. This was the power of life and death controlled by the green wood Taoist body. If it was used in battle, with a press of a finger, the enemy's vitality would be plundered, and their life would wither like a plant. Similarly, if it was used to save people, it could also achieve the magical effect of life and death. The rarest thing was that this was the innate talent of the green wood Taoist body, which could perfectly match with Lin Sun's cultivation. Having the green wood Taoist body is equivalent to giving me another body, but this body has the magical talent of the Great Way. Lin Sun's black eyes were bright, and he couldn't help but marvel in his heart. The Great Way Yellow Court scripture created by Guyupu was simply amazing and ingenious. This was only the first greenwood Taoist body, but it already had such a magical power. If the other 4 doppelgangers were condensed one by one, wouldn't it be possible to master 4 completely different kinds of magical powers? If he cultivated to the 5 virtues realm and let these 5 doppelgangers master the spiritual awareness and cultivation, how powerful would they be? After a long time, Lin Sun withdrew the star's forbidden formation. At this time, Lu Qinyan came out of the room and asked with a little doubt, "Senior, why do I feel that you seem to be a different person?" Lin Sun's previous practice was deliberately covered by him, so even though they were in the same courtyard, Lu Qinyan didn't notice it at all. "There is a slight breakthrough in cultivation." Lin Sun gave a reason with a smile. His original body had already been put away, and what appeared was actually the greenwood Taoist body. However, this kind of change in charm, appearance, and charm was difficult for ordinary people to perceive at all. "I see." Lu Qinyan suddenly understood, but she still looked at Lin Sun with a trace of doubt in her eyes. How could a breakthrough in cultivation change a person's charm? At the same time, at the foot of the guest mountain, in a courtyard, a young monk sitting in the lotus position, holding prayer beads in his hand and meditating quietly, suddenly frowned. He opened his eyes and was shocked in his heart. Why did the breath of the heretic suddenly disappear? He stood up and walked out of the room. In the courtyard, a group of barefooted monks in linen clothes and bamboo hats were sitting on futons, meditating and meditating. Each of their breaths was as deep as the sea, obscure and silent. However, when they saw the young monk coming out, they all stood up and saluted him solemnly. "Greetings, Abbot Wuming." Everyone's expressions were filled with sincerity and sincerity. In the hidden land realm, there were many adversity travelers and arhats adversity, but there were only 9 abbot adversity. Wuming was one of them. Abbot adversity was regarded as the core successor of the supreme inheritance of the hidden land realm. Each of them had a transcendent status and unfathomable cultivation. Even some old monsters would show great respect in front of abbot adversity. Wu Ming just nodded and walked out of the courtyard. Outside the courtyard, a skinny old monk wearing a bamboo hat sat on the ground. He had no breath at all, like a stone, inconspicuous. But Wu Ming bowed and said, "Uncle Du Kong, something went wrong. The Chakravarti beads in my hand can't sense the breath of the heretic." The Chakravarti beads was a kind of magical treasure. With this beads, any heretic, who was targeted by the hidden land realm, no matter where he was, could be detected by the warriors of the hidden land realm through a secret method. The emaciated old monk called Du Kong opened his eyes, and a wisp of a bright light suffused his muddy gaze as he said, "We'd already locked onto the heretic when we arrived here. That heretic is on this ship, and I've been constantly assuming command here during this period of time. I didn't notice anyone leaving this ship." Wu Ming said thoughtfully, "So, the heretic should have noticed our arrival, so he used a method that can hide his breath to block the Chakravarti bead's detection?" Du Kong nodded and said, "Wu Ming, don't be careless. Don't forget that some time ago, outside the Diu realm, Buddha Lord Lianshan and dozens of Arhats adversity had already locked the breath of the heretic. But in the end they were all killed. Buddha Lord Lianshan, a figure in the Emperor realm of the Hidden Land realm." Of course, Wu Ming also knew about this. It was said that Buddha Lord Lianshan was killed by a pink flying sword that pierced through the middle of his eyebrows. This incident caused a great commotion in the Hidden Land realm. Based on this, we can tell that there must be a big shot protecting this man. This time, the sect sent me here to be your path protector, to find out the cause of Buddha Lord Lianshan's death. Du Kong's voice was hoarse. But until now, I haven't caught any unusual breath. I can only vaguely tell that there are at least 2 figures in the Emperor realm on this ship. One should be an old man from the Jintian clan, an imperial family. He is guarding in front of the courtyard of the woman called Tian Xianyue. The other one is also on this guest mountain. She is an old woman who has changed her appearance. She is accompanied by a young man. If you count me in, there are 3 Emperor Realm experts. But I can't be sure if there are more of them in the dark. Hearing this, Wu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He said, "Uncle, are they also here for the heretic?" Du Kong was about to say something. Silently, the figure of an old woman appeared out of thin air. She ignored Wu Ming directly and looked at Du Kong. Her voice was cold. "I don't care what the Hidden Land realm is here for, and I'm not interested to know. I'm here to tell you that I don't care about your business. But my young master is on a long trip. If anyone dares to plot against him, don't blame me for being impolite." The old woman's aura was overbearing. Du Kong was silent for a moment and said, "Okay." The old woman snorted and disappeared into thin air. She left as quickly as she came. Wu Ming's eyes were filled with coldness. "Uncle, is this old woman the existence in the Emperor realm?" Du Kong nodded. His cloudy eyes were surging with obscure dark Buddha light. "That's good. At least it proves that the heretic has nothing to do with them." Wu Ming frowned. In fact, he was also shocked. An existence in the Emperor realm was personally escorting a young master? What was the identity of this young master? It was terrifying to think about it. Du Kong suddenly sighed and said in a low voice, "There are really hidden talents on this ship. Wu Ming, before I find traces of the heretic, I can't act rashly. You can only rely on yourselves." Chapter 1919. Apart from the old woman, there was also an Emperor stage cultivator from the Imperial clan, Jintian, guarding the ship. This caused Du Kong to have some reservations. Before investigating the situation clearly, if he acted rashly, it would instead arouse the vigilance and resistance of these peers, and something unexpected might happen. Most importantly, if they found out about the heretic's identity, it was bound to cause a huge commotion. After all, the heretic held a supreme fortuitous encounter from the Kunlun ruins that was related to becoming an Emperor stage cultivator. On the mountainside of Guest Mountain, there was a waterfall, a spring, and a simple and elegant courtyard. In front of the courtyard, An old man in a cloth robe was holding a jug of wine and drinking by himself. Beside him stood a group of noble disciples from the imperial clan, Jintian. All of them were dressed in embroidered clothes, and they were handsome and beautiful. They were extraordinary. In the eyes of outsiders, they were like stars in the sky, existences that could only be looked up to. They were extremely noble. However, at this moment, these young men and women were all respectful and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They restrained their pride and sharpness. The reason was that the old man in a cloth robe was their patriarch, an emperor-stage existence that had lived for countless years. In the entire White Emperor Star region, and even on the ancient path in the starry sky, the old man in a cloth robe was a famous figure. His name was Jin Tianhong, and he was known as the wind-supporting Sword Emperor. This isn't the Golden Sky world, nor is it the White Emperor Star region. All of you better restrain yourselves and don't cause trouble. The cloth-robed old man said casually, I know very well what kind of people all of you are. If you're killed by others, then you only have yourself to blame. Even if all of you die, my heart won't ache. However, all of you are surnamed Jintian after all, and the blood of the Jintian clan flows in your veins. If all of you die, I can avenge you, but don't expect me to save you. His voice was calm, but it was not polite at all. His words even revealed a sense of ruthlessness and indifference. The group of men and women looked at each other. Patriarch, it's just a boat. Could there be someone we can't afford to offend? Someone could not help but ask. The old man glanced at this person, and it terrified the latter to the point his face turned ghastly pale, and he almost knelt on the ground while his entire body was drenched in cold sweat. The cloth-robed old man retracted his gaze and drank another cup of wine. The Jintian clan is getting worse with each generation because there are too many useless people like you. As he said this, he smiled again. Thankfully, the heavens have blessed us, allowing our Jintian clan to have a few more geniuses like Xianyu. His voice was filled with gratification. All the men and women present couldn't help but feel jealous. Golden Sky Black Moon. She was a member of the same generation that made them jealous and fearful. She had cultivated for 180 years and was ranked 49th on the All Heavens King Sage list. Even the elders in the clan could only lower their heads in front of her and sigh at their inferiority. Go. Remember my words. You can stir up trouble, but don't blame anyone if you get killed. All I can do is avenge you. The cloth-robed elder waved his hand and dispersed the crowd. Not all of the juniors of the Jintian clan were useless. On the contrary, a few of them had already reached the peak of the Saint King stage. However, their temperaments were extremely unbearable. Some were arrogant, some were frivolous, and some even had evil intentions and committed all sorts of evil deed. Towards these juniors, the cloth-robed elder only felt disdain and disdain. Only Golden Sky Black Moon and a few others could catch the eye of the cloth-robed elder. Therefore, when he heard that Golden Sky Black Moon was going to the Hong Meng world to participate in the Dao discussion gathering organized by the 6 major Dao courts, he personally accompanied her. The Hidden Land Realm, the old lady, looks like there's more to this small boat than meets the eye, as the cloth-robed elder pondered. He drank another cup of wine. In the main hall of the Heavenly Music Parlor, Liang Chuan's expression was unusually serious. He looked at the important figures of the Heavenly Music Parlor and said in a deep voice, "It is an honor for the Heavenly Music Parlor to have the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan travel on this boat. However, it is also a great pressure. From today onwards, no matter what requests these distinguished guests have, the Heavenly Music Parlor will fulfill them as long as it is within our means. Do you all understand?" Everyone in the hall nodded in unison. A while ago, a group of cultivators from the Wilderness Dao Court had just been killed. At this time, who would dare to offend a colossus like the Jintian clan? Liang Chuan nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. The journey to the Hong Meng world this time had so many twists and turns. This made Liang Chuan feel extremely pressured. Whether it was the Jin Tian clan, the old lady beside Little Nine, or the deaths of the cultivators from the wilderness Dao court, they were all like mountains that weighed on Liang Chuan's heart. Even a quasi-emperor like him couldn't help but feel apprehensive. These are troubled times, Liang Chuan sighed inwardly. Young master, the Hidden Land Realm and the Jin Tian clan are all on the boat. Don't you like to watch a good show? If there are no accidents, it won't be long before there will be some trouble. In the courtyard, the old lady said with a smile. The youth in linen was lying in the rocking chair in a daze. When he heard this, he jumped up and his eyes lit up. He said excitedly, "The Hidden Land Realm? Isn't that one of the 3 dark giants? I've long heard that they are secretive and ruthless, but I don't know whether it's true or not." He rubbed his palms together and spit flew everywhere. And that monarch race, the Jin Tian clan. They are all descendants of the primordial white monarch. I have long wanted to see if their ancestral, chaotic sword-shaking scripture is as powerful as the legends say. The old lady's smile suddenly froze. She had to remind him, "Young master, you can watch the show, but if you want to join in the fun, I won't agree." Her words, like a basin of cold water, made the youth in linen lose all his strength and collapse in the rocking chair like a dead fish. He sighed. The cultivation of the great Tao is the way to subdue one's heart. If I don't temper myself, how can I achieve anything? Grandma, please take pity on me and give me a chance? But no matter how he begged, the old lady just wouldn't agree. The youth in linen scratched his ears and cheeks anxiously, but in the end there was nothing he could do. "Miss Qinyan, now on this boat, undercurrents are surging and the situation is treacherous. I'm worried that trouble will come to us," Lin Sun muttered. Lin Sun pondered. He suspected that the descendants of the Hidden Land Realm came for him, so he had to remind Lu Qinyan. "Trouble?" Lu Qinyan's watery eyes widened. Lin Sun nodded. "Yes, but it's just my feeling. It's hard to say whether it will happen or not. Anyway, you'd better be prepared." Lu Qinyan nodded. What Lin Sun and Lu Qinyan didn't expect was that trouble came to them that night. The night was as dark as ink. Yu Jun, the holy king of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, came in person. "Qinyan, the distinguished guests of the Jin Tian clan, an imperial family, have heard that you have great attainments in music, and would like to invite you to the Cloud Jade Pavilion." Lin Sun and Lu Qinyan frowned at his words. How could the people of the Jin Tian clan have heard of Lu Qinyan? Someone must have deliberately mentioned Lu Qinyan to arouse the interest of these distinguished guests of the Jin Tian clan. "I'm sorry, Miss Qinyan is in closed-door training and doesn't plan to go out recently." Lin Sun refused flatly. Yu Jun's face darkened. You are just a guard. What qualifications do you have to make decisions for the descendants of Heavenly Sound Pavilion? Lin Sun said stiffly. "Qinyan said that my idea is her idea." Yu Jun's eyes were full of killing intent. "Yu Xian, you are really tired of living. I'm not afraid to tell you that if Qinyan doesn't go to the Cloud Jade Pavilion, the highest elder Liang Chuan will not care even if you are killed this time." At this time, Lu Qinyan walked out of the room and said, "Uncle, if you continue to force me like this, I will die immediately." Yu Jun was stunned. If Lu Qinyan died, how could he explain to Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court? He hurriedly said, "Qinyan, this time we invite you to go to the Cloud Jade Pavilion. We can't afford to offend those distinguished guests of the Jin Tian clan. Even the highest elder Liang Chuan said that we must not neglect and offend these distinguished guests." Lu Qinyan showed a look of disgust. "In order not to offend them, you are forcing me to go to the Cloud Jade Pavilion to meet them?" Yu Jun sighed. "Qinyan, because of you, many strong men of the primitive Taoist court have suffered, and our Heavenly Sound Pavilion has also been implicated. Now if we offend the Jin Tian clan because of you, the consequences, even your master Zhuang Yunji can't bear it." Lu Qingyan's face changed. She didn't care about anything else, but she had to care about her master Zhuang Yunji. Qingyan, listen to me. There will be trouble if you go. It's better to stay here. Lin Sun said resolutely. Yu Xian, you are really looking for death. Yu Jun was completely angry. The last time he came, he took it to heart because Lin Sun slapped Zhan Bing in front of him. Now Lin Sun obstructed him like this, which made his inner anger and hatred burst out directly. A saint king of the Yu family of the imperial family dared to oppose him like this. He was simply tired of living. But when he was about to take action, Clatter Lin Sun directly activated the star's forbidden formation, blocking Yu Jun outside the courtyard. Soon Yu Jun's angry roar sounded outside the courtyard. Yu Xian, quickly remove the formation, or I will tear you into pieces and grind your bones to ashes. He was flustered and exasperated. This boat was the territory of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, but now, a saint king of the Yu family of the imperial family dared to oppose him like this. Lin Sun ignored all this, sat leisurely under the big tree in the courtyard, picked up the green wine gourd and drank. Yu Xian, just you wait. After a long time, Yu Jun left angrily after uttering a harsh word. At this time, Lin Sun looked at Lu Qingyan and said, Qingyan, are you afraid? Lu Qingyan shook her head. I'm just a little worried about my master. Lin Sun said, Don't worry, your master is a peerless saint king. The Heavenly Sound Pavilion dare not do anything to her, but Lu Qingyan's heart tightened and she said, Senior, I'm afraid I've implicated you again this time. What should we do? Her voice was full of uncontrollable worry. Lin Sun smiled, looking calm and relaxed. Now, with the Greenwood Taoist body, even if he encountered trouble, he would not be afraid to reveal some of his strength. Chapter 1920. Emerald Cloud Pavilion. It was resplendent and magnificent. Wu Yunlian and the rest of the Heavenly Music Parlor's younger generation Qi practitioners sat respectfully with the guests from the monarch race, the Jintian clan, drinking and enjoying themselves. In the pavilion, the sound of stringed and bamboo instruments rang out. The wonderful music was like the sounds of nature, and there were also beautiful singers dancing lightly. Wu Yunlian had a proud smile on her face. Just now, when she was entertaining the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, she deliberately mentioned that there was a descendant of the younger generation of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion named Lu Qingyan, who was as beautiful as a poem and as graceful as a painting. What was rare was that her attainments in music were superb. She could be called a fairy of the younger generation of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. This naturally aroused the interest of the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan. So Wu Yunlian struck while the iron was hot and immediately invited Lu Qingyan to come. This bitch can't refuse this time. If she appears, it will not be so easy to leave, Wu Yunlian thought in her heart. She was jealous of Lu Qingyan, who was above her in appearance, temperament and cultivation. The most intolerable thing was that Kong Yu, the descendant of the primitive Tao court, was originally regarded by her as the perfect Taoist companion. But who would have thought that Kong Yu fell in love with Lu Qingyan? This made Wu Yunlian's jealousy even stronger. She could not wait to destroy Lu Qingyan. Why hasn't Miss Qingyan come yet? Suddenly, a man in a silver robe spoke, frowning slightly. The lively atmosphere in the hall suddenly became stagnant. Many people turned to look at Wu Yunlian. Wu Yunlian's heart trembled and she quickly said, Young master, please calm down. I will send someone to urge them. The man in the silver robe was called Jin Tianqi, a pure-blood descendant of the Jintian clan. His status was extremely noble, and the men and women of the Jintian clan around him all followed his lead. Wu Yunlian did not dare to slight such an esteemed guest. But before she could urge him, Yu Jun returned alone with a gloomy expression. Martial uncle, where is junior sister Lu Qingyan? Wu Yunlian asked. Yu Jun gritted his teeth and said, She was blocked by Yu Xian. Yu Xian is so bold. Wu Yunlian slapped the table and stood up. Her eyes were cold. Martial uncle, why didn't you do it? The atmosphere in the hall was silent. The silver-robed man, Jin Tianqi, and the others all frowned. A successor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion actually dared to refuse to meet with them? Yu Jun's expression changed indeterminately. There's a restrictive formation set up in that courtyard, and even I can't see through it. That's why I didn't make a move immediately. Wu Yunlian's beautiful face was filled with frost. This is our support boat, and he, Yu Xian, actually dared to do this without permission. This is simply preposterous. I don't care about Yu Xian, I just want to ask you, is it because our Jintian clan's face is not big enough to invite Lady Qingyan? Jin Tianqi said unhappily, feeling a little annoyed. Just today, they, the Jintian clansmen, were reprimanded by their ancestor, Sword Emperor Fufeng. They didn't feel good about it. That was why they gathered at the Emerald Cloud Pavilion to drown their sorrows in wine. Who would have thought that they would encounter something like this, which made them very unhappy? It was fine that their ancestor reprimanded them, but a successor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion dared to refuse to meet with them. It was clear that she didn't put them in her eyes. Hearing this, Wu Yunlian shivered all over and said quickly, Martial Uncle Yu Jun, please go with me. No matter what means you use, you must invite junior sister Qingyan for me. She emphasized the word invite. Yu Jun also saw that Jin Tianqi and the other distinguished guests of the Jintian clan were very unhappy, so he didn't dare to neglect and hurried away. Wu Yunlian picked up a wine cup and showed a charming smile. Come, let me toast you first. I hope you can calm down and don't lower yourself to the same level as junior sister Qingyan. Jin Tianqi looked indifferent. If Lu Qingyan doesn't come, I won't drink this wine. The atmosphere suddenly became oppressive. Wu Yunlian looked embarrassed and her body was stiff. She was furious to the extreme. Lu Qingyan, you bitch, when you come, you won't be able to bear the pain. Guest Mountain. Yu Jun led a group of people in a threatening manner. Along the way, they attracted the attention of countless gazes. The teenager in linen climbed up the wall excitedly and muttered, "The show is about to begin." The old woman smiled and ignored him. In another place, the old man in linen robe drank a cup of wine and seemed to be unaware of it. In front of the courtyard at the foot of the mountain, Du Kong closed his eyes and remained motionless from beginning to end. Old Du removed the spiritual qi restriction formation in this courtyard. When they arrived in front of Lin Sun's courtyard, Yu Jun immediately gave the order. The boat was covered in layers of restrictive formations, including every courtyard on the guest mountain. There were restrictions to replenish spiritual energy. Old Du was the elder of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion who was in charge of these spiritual qi restriction formations. Old Du, who was as thin as bamboo, took out a turtle shell-shaped formation plate and waved it gently. Buzz with a roar, the restriction formation covering Lin Sun's courtyard was removed, leaving only the Stars Forbidden formation arranged by Lin Sun in operation. Yu Jun said in a deep voice, Yu Xian, how long can your restriction formation run without the support of spiritual power? If you obediently cooperate now, I can spare your life. Otherwise, when I barge in, it will be the day of your death. His voice was cold and full of killing intent. However, no one in the courtyard responded. Lin Sun was drinking. Lu Qingyan was in a daze. Yu Jun's face became more and more gloomy. He took a deep breath and waved his hand. Break this restriction formation for me. Boom. 7 or 8 Saint Kings of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, who came with Yu Jun, launched an attack without hesitation. But all the attacks were dissolved and dissipated by the power of the restriction formation like a clay ox entering the sea. Yu Jun's pupils shrank. Only then did he realize that this restriction formation was not as simple as he thought. Go on, do your best, he bellowed. If he didn't take Lu Qingyan to the Emerald Cloud Pavilion as soon as possible, who could bear the anger of those distinguished guests of Jintian family? Boom, boom, boom. All kinds of treasures and Taoist magic bombarded the restriction formation like a tide, producing a deafening roar. The noise had already alarmed the guests living in different parts of the guest mountain, who all sent their divine senses to this side. Haha, that restriction formation has the power of defense and binding. Even an emperor-to-be can't break it in a short time. These idiots are really too stupid. The young man in linen, who was watching from the top of the wall, laughed happily. At the same time, Lu Qingyan couldn't help but worry, "Senior, if we continue like this, it will cause too much noise. It will be tantamount to completely offending the heavenly sound pavilion." Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "That's true." He stood up and waved his sleeves. An obvious flaw appeared in the star's restriction formation. After doing all this, Lin Sun clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Let's invite them into the trap first, and then close the door to beat the dog. The noise will not be so big." "It's open." Outside the courtyard, someone exclaimed in surprise. Yu Jun waved his hand, his killing intent soaring. "Rush in and kill Yu Xian. Let's go." All the Saint Kings of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion rushed in together. When he saw Lin Sun standing in the courtyard, a grim smile appeared on Yu Jun's face and he said, "Take Qingyan to the Emerald Cloud Pavilion. I'll deal with this bastard." As he spoke, Yu Jun did not hesitate to take action. This time, he was really angry and mad. Yu Xian was just a Saint King, but he dared to oppose him again and again. Did he really think that with the support of the Yu family, he could be lawless? Naive. Childish. Ridiculous. This time, he would let him see what it meant to be torn into pieces, and what it meant to be smashed into ashes. Boom! Yu Jun's big hand shot out like a heavy mountain, the sound of Tao rumbled, and the divine light surged. They didn't notice that the star's restriction formation, which they thought had been broken, had been restored to its original state. At the same time, other Saint Kings walked towards Lu Qingyan with a posture that said, "If you dare to resist, don't blame us for being rude." However, in this dangerous situation, Lu Qingyan seemed to be unaware of it. Her mind was completely attracted by the situation on Lin Sun's side. When she saw Yu Jun take action, she was so nervous that she held her breath. Elder Yu Jun was a veritable Saint King. What could Yu Xian use to fight against him? But the next moment an incredible scene appeared. Lin Sun suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed in the air. Not only was Yu Jun's palm force broken, it turned into a rain of light. Yu Jun's whole body was grasped like a chicken. The saint rulers were all shocked by this unexpected scene. They stopped and were filled with disbelief. Yu Jun was stunned. His mind was blank, and there was only one thought in his mind. Was this the power of a Saint King? "I've tolerated enough, but you provoke me again and again. Are you in such a hurry to die?" Lin Sun sighed. There was a sense of helplessness in this sentence. "What are you doing? Let go of Elder Yu Jun. This is the Fuyishu boat, the territory of the Heavenly Sound School." Someone shouted. Bang! Yu Jun also wanted to speak, but before he could speak, Lin Sun exerted force with his palm. The terrible power was like a landslide and a tsunami, robbing Yu Jun's body of vitality. One could see with the naked eye that his body shriveled up and quickly turned into ashes that drifted away. Greenwood Taoist body, the power of life and death. An ultimate sage king was wiped out just like that. The other Saint Kings were frightened, their faces pale. Yu Xian had been regarded as a worthless waste since he boarded the boat. No one had expected that under his cultivation of Saint King, there was such a terrible power. Who on earth was he? Lu Qingyan was also stunned. "Everyone, Yu Xian, have always been honest and dutiful since I boarded the boat. Why do you always look down on and target me?" Lin Sun looked at those Saint Kings, his eyes deep like an unfathomable abyss. "Run!" Those Saint Kings shivered and wanted to escape without hesitation. They were indeed frightened. Yu Jun was a Saint King, but he was killed in the blink of an eye. How terrifying was that? How could Lin Sun let them escape again? His figure flickered, and he moved casually without a trace of anger. But in just a few blinks of an eye, these 7 or 8 Saint King elders of the Heavenly Sound School were all killed on the spot. Each of their vitality was taken away and turned into withered ashes, making Lin Sun look like a god in charge of life and death. Chapter 1921. A series of clanking sounds rang out. Scattered holy treasures and storage treasures fell on the ground, shining brightly. All the big shots of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, including Yu Jun, were turned into ashes and disappeared from the world. Witnessing this scene, Lu Qingyan was stunned for a while before she suddenly raised her head. Her clear eyes were full of shock. She asked, "Senior, who are you?" Lin Sun knew that Lu Qingyan must be suspicious. He suddenly felt a headache and said, "Miss Qingyan, I just never intended to expose my strength." Lu Qingyan shook her head. "My master said that Senior Yu Xian from the Yu family is only at the Saint King realm. It's impossible for him to kill the Holy King as easily as you did." Speaking of this, she seemed to think of something and couldn't help saying, "The strongmen of primitive Tao court who were killed a few days ago, are they?" Without waiting for her to finish, Lin Sun said frankly, "Yes, it's me." Lu Qingyan was in a trance and said, "If you were really Yu Xian, how could you have the courage to kill the strongmen of the primitive Taoist court? What's more, the real Yu Xian would not have done such a shocking thing for me," she murmured, trying to calm herself down, but she couldn't calm down because of the shock. "Miss Qingyan, you only need to know that I will never hurt you." Lin Sun sighed in his heart. He had vaguely realized that Lu Qingyan should have guessed some of the truth. "Okay." After a long time, Lu Qingyan nodded and stared at Lin Sun with a pair of bright and clear eyes. "Senior, I trust you." Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "That's good." Thinking of the scene just now, Lu Qingyan was worried and said, "Senior, you have killed so many people of Heavenly Sound Pavilion. What should we do next?" "Counter soldiers with arms and water with earth," Lin Sun said calmly. Anyway, they had already fallen out. It was nothing more than a fight. On the wall in the distance, the teenager in linen sighed with emotion, "I have seen people die, but I have never seen one so eager to die." He seemed to have already guessed the ending. Immediately, the teenager couldn't help but laugh gloatingly. "Well, now you are exposed, buddy. Doesn't this mean that the good show has just begun?" Time passed. The atmosphere in the Emerald Cloud Pavilion grew more and more oppressive. After Yu Jun left, Jin Tianqi and the other Jin Tian clansmen's faces turned gloomy and gloomy after a long time. Was this how the Heavenly Music Parlor treated its guests? Too much. Wu Yunlian, on the other hand, was like an ant on a hot pan. She was restless and grumbling in her heart. It was just dealing with a Saint King, yet it took so much time? Seeing the expressions of Jin Tianqi and the others becoming more and more unsightly, Wu Yunlian could not help but become nervous. "Senior Martial Sister Wu, it's bad." After Martial Uncle Yu Jun and the others entered Junior Martial Sister Qingyan's courtyard, they haven't come out. Suddenly, a descendant of the Heavenly Music Pavilion rushed over. He was sweating profusely and had a panicked expression. "I suspect they might have encountered some unforeseen event." "What?" Wu Yunlian suddenly stood up. Her expression was gloomy and uncertain. "Bah!" A member of the Jintian clan smashed the wine glass in his hand and sneered gloomily, "Lu Qingyan, we just want to see her, but she made so many twists and turns. She obviously looks down on us." Wu Yunlian and the other successors of the Heavenly Music Pavilion couldn't help but panic and stood up. Everyone, just as Wu Yunlian was about to say something, she was interrupted by Jin Tianqi. He said coldly, "Our ancestor just said today that we shouldn't make trouble, so I don't want to argue with you. But you must hand over Lu Qingyan to me. Yes, this bitch is so shameless. If we don't teach her a lesson, how can we, the Jintian clan, put our face?" Immediately, other members of the Jintian clan spoke with gloomy faces. In the great golden sky world, who dared to be disrespectful to them, who had the guts to slight them. But now, a descendant of the heavenly music pavilion dared to not give them face. In fact, the most important thing was that they were in a bad mood today. They were just taking the opportunity to vent their emotions. Where is Lu Qingyan? Since she didn't come, how about we go and see her in person? Jin Tianqi stared coldly at Wu Yunlian. Wu Yunlian's pretty face was pale, and she felt cold all over. If Lu Qingyan fell into the hands of Jin Tianqi, she would definitely not end well. Although Wu Yunlian wanted Lu Qingyan to die, she knew that once Lu Qingyan died, no one would be able to pass Kong Yu's test. She took a deep breath and explained in a low voice, "Young master, Lu Qingyan's identity is not simple. She is the lover of Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court. If anything happens to her, it would have been better if these words hadn't been spoken, but as soon as they were spoken, it caused Jin Tianqi and the others to be infuriated, and their expressions were extremely unsightly. What do you mean? Are you using Kong Yu to suppress us?" Jin Tianqi's face was livid. Of course, they knew that Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court was a direct descendant of the imperial Kong clan, but how could the Jintian clan be afraid of him? Wu Yunlian was like being struck by lightning. "I'll give you a chance. Take us to see Lu Qingyan." Jin Tianqi gave an order, leaving no room for doubt. The night was as dark as ink and the streets were noisy. Wu Yunlian led a group of angry Jintian clansmen to the guest mountain. This scene could not be concealed at all, and was noticed by many people. "Have you heard that Lu Qingyan, the successor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, refused to meet the Jintian clansmen, and completely angered them? I'm afraid something big is going to happen. The Heavenly Sound Pavilion is too unlucky. Not long ago, the experts of the primitive Taoist court died, and even Hua Dian, a quasi-emperor, could only kneel down and beg for mercy. Now they have provoked the Jintian clan, an imperial clan. Lu Qingyan? This is a famous fairy in the Ziheng star field. I heard that because she offended Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court, she was given the cold shoulder and suppressed by the Heavenly Sound Pavilion." On the rocking boat, many voices of discussion rang out. On one of the streets there was a stall. The stall owner was a middle-aged man with dark skin, like a farmer. On the stall there were all kinds of seeds, as well as a rusty hoe. A man in a luxurious robe passed by, and curiously squatted in front of the stall, and pointed to a thumb-sized black seed and said, "How many doctrine gems does this little thing cost?" The middle-aged man, who looked like a farmer, raised his eyelids, and revealed a simple and honest smile. "Not expensive, 800,000 doctrine gems." The man in the luxurious robe was stunned, and asked in astonishment, "How much?" The middle-aged man said seriously, 800,000 doctrine gems. "Not expensive. Do you think I'm an idiot?" The man in the luxurious robe spat fiercely, and flicked his sleeves and left. The middle-aged man smiled, and did not mind. This was the seed of a true Tao essence fruit. Not to mention 800,000 doctrine gems, even if it was 8 million doctrine gems, countless cultivators would fight for it. Unfortunately, there were too few people in this world who knew what was good for them. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man looked at the guest mountain in the distance, and murmured to himself, "How many people on that mountain know what is good for them?" When Jin Tianqi and the others, led by Wu Yunlian, walked up the guest mountain, the old monk, Du Kong, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the courtyard, had a smile on his lips. This kind of situation indeed required the appearance of some troublemakers. Perhaps this was the only way to lure the heretic out? Halfway up the mountain, the old man in a linen robe, who was lying on a wooden chair and pretending to sleep, snorted coldly from his nostrils. This group of good-for-nothings. The young man in linen robe, who was lying on top of the wall, was instantly amused when he saw this scene. He waved his hand and said, "You know that there is a tiger on the mountain, but you still want to go there. Brothers, have a good trip." Jin Tianqi and the others frowned and snorted coldly, feeling a little annoyed. But in the end, they still held it in. They had already heard that a quasi-emperor realm elder of the Heavenly Sound Parlor had knelt in front of this courtyard. And the young man and the old woman who lived in this courtyard were very likely to belong to the kind of people who could not be provoked. This was precisely the reason why Jean Tianqi and the others had exercised forbearance. Otherwise, if it was at an ordinary time, they would have slapped that noisy linen-clothed young man to death. Seeing this, Wu Yunlian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She was really worried that Jean Tianqi and the others would go crazy and start a conflict with the young man in linen robe. If that happened, even if the gods fought, the mortals would suffer, and the Heavenly Sound Parlor would also be implicated. Thinking about this, Wu Yunlian felt a pang of sadness. In the Purple Hung Starfield, the Heavenly Sound Parlor was the #1 orthodoxy. As the descendants, when had they ever suffered such grievances? But after leaving the Purple Hung Starfield, Wu Yunlian realized how vast the starry sky ancient path was, and how many powerful beings in this world could not be provoked. It's finally going to be lively. The young man in linen robe licked his lips excitedly. The Imperial Clan, the Jintian Clan, the primitive Dao Court, the Heavenly Sound Parlor. There are so many forces, how many would I dare to offend? You little brat, you just want to see the world in chaos. The old woman scolded with a smile and then said solemnly, I'm warning you, that person will bear the consequences of his actions. Whether he lives or dies, it has nothing to do with you. I won't get involved either. The young man in linen robe said helplessly, I know. I can at least watch the show, right? The old woman nodded, of course. At this time, Jean Tianqi and the others had come to the courtyard where Lin Sun was. Here? Jean Tianqi looked around. Yes. Wu Yunlian nodded. She felt bitter in her heart. Her only hope was that Liang Chuan and Hua Dian, the two elders, could come as soon as they heard the news. Otherwise, there would be a big mess here. Is Lu Qingyan here? Jean Tianqi asked in a deep voice. He had accumulated anger in his heart and had nowhere to vent it. Today, he was reprimanded by the old ancestor, and then refused by Lu Qingyan, a little successor of the Heavenly Sound Parlor. How could he swallow this anger? What's the matter? Lin Sun's voice sounded in the courtyard. At the same time, Lin Sun couldn't help but frown. This time, it was not the strong practitioners of the Heavenly Sound Parlor. What's the matter? Jean Tianqi was completely annoyed and said coldly, Lu Qingyan doesn't want to see us. Can we come to see her? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. He had already guessed the identity of the other party, and he couldn't help but feel speechless. Chapter 1922. Lu Qingyan didn't want to see us, so we came to see her, okay? Even a fool would be able to sense the anger in his words. Wu Yunlian was anxious. If Lu Qingyan really bowed her head and came out to meet them, she would definitely be severely beaten by these playboys of the Jintian clan. It was hard to say whether she could live or not. Wu Yunlian didn't care about Lu Qingyan's life or death. What she cared about was how to explain to Kong Yu if Lu Qingyan died. But to everyone's surprise, the gate of the courtyard was still closed in the face of Jean Tianqi and others who came to denounce them. Only Lin Sun's indifferent voice sounded, no. These two words caused the expressions of Jean Tianqi and the others to freeze, and the flames of rage in their eyes seemed to be blazing. They had already come in person, but in the end the door was shut in their face again. Who is the man who spoke? Jean Tianqi's voice was cold and piercing. Wu Yunlian hurriedly said, Yu Xian, an overmatch of the Yu clan of the Imperial clan, is now serving as the guard of Sister Qingyan. The Yu clan of the Imperial clan? Jean Tianqi sneered. It's just an ancient Imperial clan. How dare they make life difficult for us? They must be tired of living. The others also sneered. The Imperial clans were divided into the immemorial Imperial clan, the ancient Imperial clan, and the contemporary Imperial clan. And Jintian clan was the immemorial Imperial clan. In the eyes of these clansmen of the Jintian clan, they naturally despised and looked down on the Yu clan of the Imperial clan. A group of brainless playboys. How can the strength of an Imperial clan be measured by the length of its existence? The young man in linen sighed in his heart. As far as he knew, there were several behemoths among the contemporary Imperial clans, which were not inferior to some immemorial Imperial clans at all. That was to say, whether a force had a long history or not didn't mean that its power was necessarily stronger. But it's also true that the Jintian clan of the Imperial clan is an old immemorial Imperial clan, which Yu clan of the Imperial clan can't compete with. It's just that these fools are too blind, the young man in linen muttered. Yu Xian. Suddenly Jin Tianqi shouted, I'll give you 3 breaths to think about it, before he finished. The closed gate of the courtyard opened and Lin Sun walked out. Jin Tianqi and the others were first stunned, and then they couldn't help but start laughing while their eyes were filled with contempt. Look, didn't the experts of the Imperial clan, Yu clan, also obediently admit defeat? You're smart. Kneel down and wait here. When we see Lu Qingyan, we'll deal with you. A charming and beautiful woman spoke coldly and bossily. However, Lin Sun seemed to turn a deaf ear to them. He looked indifferent and glanced at the crowd, saying, If you kill the young ones, the old ones will definitely be restless. In this case, it should be okay to teach them a lesson, right? You dare to talk back. The charming woman raised her hand and slapped Lin Sun. Pah! The crisp sound of a slap resounded. However, the one who was slapped was the charming woman. Her face was red and swollen, and blood spurted out of her mouth and nose. She was sent flying and smashed into the ground. From the beginning to the end, no one saw clearly how Lin Sun moved. Jin Tianqi and the others were slightly stunned, and they revealed expressions of disbelief. This fellow actually dared to make a move in front of us? See, you saw it too. Not only do I dare to talk back, I also dare to fight back. Lin Sun's eyes were cold. Kill. Kill him. The charming woman screamed angrily. Her hair was disheveled, and her face was distorted. Boom. A strong young man took out a black heavy sword. The sword intent was like a mountain, crushing the void, and the power of law emerged. Lin Sun sighed in his heart and no longer hesitated. He didn't move, but there was a slap. The strong young man was slapped away as if he had been hit by a holy mountain. He screamed like a pig being slaughtered. He was even more miserable than the charming woman. His face was sunken, his teeth flew out, his head buzzed, and he saw stars. He almost fainted. Everyone couldn't help but gasp, and their faces changed abruptly. The strong young man was a peerless saint king. Although he had just entered this realm, his combat power should not be underestimated. But now, he had no time to dodge and was slapped away like a fly. Didn't you say that he was a saint king? Jin Tianqi's face was gloomy and his eyes flickered. Wu Yunlian also couldn't believe it, and then she cried out involuntarily, Uncle Yu Jun and others. Were they defeated by you? Lin Sun said lightly, They are not too stupid. This. Wu Yunlian was stunned. She didn't know this at all before. What about you? Do you retreat or do you want to be slapped in the face one by one? Lin Sun looked at Jin Tianqi and others with his dark eyes. Jin Tianqi and others' faces changed, and they were so angry that their lungs were about to explode. The old ancestor reprimanded them, and Lu Qingyan refused their invitation. Now even a guard dared to act like a tyrant in front of them. In the past, when had they suffered such treatment? No. Let's kill this bastard together. Jin Tianqi roared. Crack. As soon as his voice fell, he was slapped heavily in the face. His whole face was badly mutilated, and a bloody 5-finger palm print collapsed. Ah! Jin Tianqi let out a blood-curdling scream as his body tumbled out. Even he was no match for Lin Sun. Crack! 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 In the following time, crisp slaps sounded one after another, and the clansmen of the Jintian clan were sent flying one after another. They also tried to resist and attack with all their strength, but in front of Lin Sun, they were simply a group of vulnerable chickens and dogs, and were suppressed one by one. In the end, in front of the gate of the courtyard, miserable screams rang out incessantly, piercing the night sky. And on the ground, the clansmen of the Jintian clan, whose faces were like pig heads, disheveled hair, and mouths dripping blood, were extremely miserable. And all of this was over in merely an instant. Only Wu Yunlian was left standing there. Her face was pale, and her mind was blank from shock. She stood there in a daze. This was the distinguished guest of the Jintian clan. Yet, he was beaten up on the support boat. At the thought of this, Wu Yunlian's eyes darkened, and she even wanted to die. Lin Sun stepped forward and said softly, "There is one more thing I forgot to tell you, you Jun and others are all dead." Wu Yunlian's pupils suddenly dilated as if she was struck by lightning. She was so angry that she coughed up a mouthful of blood. "You! How dare you?" She couldn't believe it, and she was about to go crazy. Lin Sun looked up at the sky, then at the surroundings and sighed. "There's no other way. Keeping a low profile and enduring is fine, but it's all useless. Instead, I'll be seen as a coward by you all. Miss, do you think the current situation will allow me to continue enduring?" Wu Yunlian was stunned, and her face was filled with confusion. She didn't understand. But Lin Sun had already answered, "No, as long as Miss Qinyan is still on this ship, there will be more and more troubles. And I can't just watch her being wronged, so I have to make the first move." Wu Yunlian asked subconsciously, "Aren't you afraid of revenge?" Lin Sun revealed a mocking smile. "What do you think?" Wu Yunlian felt a bone-chilling coldness, as if the person standing in front of her wasn't a person, but a god of death, and it made her feel extreme fear. Who is it?" Lin Sun's voice became deeper. "I heard that in the Heavenly Sound Parlor you hate Miss Qinyan the most, but from today onwards, it's no longer important." Wu Yunlian shivered and screamed, "What do you want to do?" Before her voice died away, Lin Sun had put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't be afraid, I'm just helping you get rid of it." Clatter silently, Wu Yunlian's body suddenly withered, and her vitality flowed away. She turned into a handful of ashes and scattered in the air. After doing all this, Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and looked at the distant night with deep eyes. He was waiting. During this period of time, he had been enduring and keeping a low profile. He thought that after killing the strongmen of the primitive Taoist court, the Heavenly Sound Parlor could restrain itself. But now, he found that he was wrong. Blind forbearance could not solve the problem at all, nor could it help Lu Qinyan get rid of her trapped situation. Just like tonight, if it weren't for him, Lu Qinyan would have been persecuted by the playboys of the Jintian clan. "Get out of here." Lin Sun looked down and glanced at Jin Tianqi and others lying on the ground. These people of the Jintian clan, who had suffered a great loss and great humiliation, all showed their hatred and got up to leave. Lin Sun ignored them. He knew that there must be old monsters in the Jintian clan, and they must have noticed what happened. The reason why Lin Sun didn't kill these people was very clear. He had already given face to the Jintian clan. If they didn't know what was good for them, he wouldn't be polite anymore. "Dude, you've pierced the sky." The young man in linen witnessed all this with a strange look in his eyes. "Pierced the sky? It's just a boat. It's not that exaggerated." Lin Sun said indifferently, "You'd better be less noisy later, otherwise the senior beside you will feel sorry for you." The young man in linen was stunned and said angrily, "Do you think I'm afraid of trouble?" Lin Sun asked, "If you're not afraid of trouble, why do you always lie on the wall and dare not go out?" The young man in linen was silent. His face was gloomy and he seemed to be struggling in his heart. "Young master, don't be affected by his words. Your path is different from his. Don't embarrass yourself." The old woman suddenly appeared and comforted the young man in linen. Then she glanced at Lin Sun coldly. "You are a smart man. You must have realized that you can't protect yourself. However, if you want to drag my young master into the water by this means, don't blame me for being rude. Drag him into the water? Lin Sun shook his head with a smile and said no more. The young man in linen looked up and was about to say something, but the old woman grabbed his clothes and took him into the yard. At the same time, her indifferent and cold voice sounded in Lin Sun's ears. Young man, it's kind enough for my young master to take the blame for you once. If you push your luck again, you will be overestimating yourself.